Greetings, everyone, and we are at episode 20 of Lines on a Page. We're going to be doing something a hell of a lot different tonight, and we're going to be doing a little bit of just a sit-down, very casual interview, and also watching a different artist, possibly also do a sketch and pick his brain at the same time. And of course, I know, apparently the Super Bowl decided to wreck our plans and decide to do a bunch of commercials and a random music act in the middle. I don't know what all that's about. Actually, I do know what all that's about. It's several $1 billion worth. But you know what? I don't have those answers, and I don't really care at this present moment. But what I do care about is we're going to be doing a little shopkeeping at the very beginning of all this. If you happen to like this show, any other show that we do, please remember to like and subscribe. And Haven Comics is located at 1871 Slaughter Road, Suite F in Madison, Alabama. And if you want to follow me anywhere on social media, you can find me at linktree.com/tpriceartworks. That's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Hive, Mastodon, Tumblr, other places, I think. So, without ado, looks like we got some comments already. Todd's coming in for the win. Hey, you guys! And don't we know there's a sports ball going on TV? So yeah, I love you, Tots. All right, so without a further ado, the man with the plan, who apparently has a favorite color, and it's Tickle Me Pink. It is Reid Beaman!
Hey guys.
Hey.
Also, I like the fact that you include the Tickle Me Pink thing as the running thing. I don't know where that came from, but it's fuchsia. It's called fuchsia.
Pretty sure. And I just know my Crayola colors. That's all I know. So, little introduction before we start picking Reid's brain. I met Reid in Baltimore for the very first time at the Baltimore Artist Alley, actually him and his wife. And we were all very much perplexed as to the size of the Artist Alley tables that we got stuck with, along with the fact of whatever union we were buying this stuff off of. What we bought wasn't what we got.
That's true.
Yeah. Who was the other guy that was on our row that was to your right?
I can't even remember his name. That's terrible, but I can't remember his name.
I just know exactly what he looks like, and apparently he is also a chef. Hello.
Yeah, there's the missus. But yeah, I think David? Was it David or Dave?
I think it's either David or Daniel.
Maybe it was. Yeah, you're talking about the guy that had the box that he made, right? Because he was also a painter.
Yeah.
A
lot of glass.
Yeah, because what was wrong with his table?
So apparently, so when I got there at that Artist Alley, I was setting everything up, or that Friday. Because I just left my stuff there Thursday, and I saw they were still setting up tables and displays and stuff. So I'm like, come back and do this Friday. So we're here on Friday, and I realized the dimensions of the table, something about them was completely off. And that guy basically was just like, man, this really sucks. They actually shrunk the table size this year. And I'm like, oh. So it's not just me with my depth perception it's just off or anything like that. Like the tables were actually smaller. So what was weird is that like with that union that they were doing all this stuff with, the package deal that I thought that I was buying whenever we signed up for it and we got accepted, that there was a table skirt on top of a backdrop thing as well, but apparently that was like an additional fee thing. And then if you wanted it in all black with like a giant, moat thing, table skirt, whatever, that was like an additional like $500 or whatever. So I'm just like, no, I'm good. I think that was the Diamond exclusive. I think that's
Okay.
what they're calling it. It was like a Diamond retailers exclusive or something like that.
I'm not even, it may have been that. I just thought it was weird, like how they set it up and then like the gaps that they have between the tables, because remember they kept moving us down and
Yeah.
like trying to get more and more room for like more and more tables.
Mm.
And then, I mean, otherwise than that, I mean, it was fine. But yeah, the tables definitely were a lot smaller than what they were, at
Yeah.
least what I remember reading them being.
Yeah.
So
And then the guy who was to my left basically got me sick.
yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, because he coughed the entire time that was there. I'm still surprised that like I didn't get I didn't get sick or anything. My wife, she got sick. That, but we're exactly not. I mean, who knows, man? There was so many people in Baltimore, but it was so much
Oh
fun
yeah.
though. I mean, there's just no telling. I mean, with the thousands of people that came in and out of that, that whole area. Plus, they had not the writers retreat, but it was for Diamond, the Diamond retreat and stuff that they were having upstairs. And then
Yeah.
there was also a coin collection going on at the
Okay.
same time.
Sorry, what was that question?
I said there was a coin collection, like collector's thing going on the other side of the convention center too.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, because that convention center is so big. Um, Half of it was like the retail part,
Yeah.
and that went on, and then it turned into like Baltimore Comic Con, and then on the other side of the convention center they had some type of coin expo. Because me and my wife, we ended up walking through that
Yeah.
like to get to where we needed to go. I mean, being new in the city and like not really knowing where everything is like that was always fun.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out like how do I get in and not get shot by security. So like
I don't know, man. I'm pretty sure we could outrun security because they were all pretty heavy set people.
I don't know what one of the guys that was in there. He was a big dude. Like he was a big beefy dude. Like down there, that where you had to go in through the bottom where the tunnel is to go
Yeah.
through the convention. Yeah, I just couldn't believe like how many like the tunnel system. I'd never been to a convention center that had a tunnel system. I was like, wow, this must be what it's like when you work at Disneyland. Because in Florida and like I maybe in California too, that like all the networking for people to move around is all underground.
Yeah.
So instead of being above ground, so I was like, well, I guess it's kind of like that. It's kind of interesting. So
So the crazy thing is that like so the Vaughn Civic Center in Huntsville was nowhere near as big as the Baltimore Civic Center. And then what
mm,
makes it even weird is that so the South Hall, where the Huntsville Comic and Pop Expo happens, it could easily fit inside that room that we were in and still have enough extra space. Like that was just how massive that room was that we were in.
wow,
And which I mean, it's still a big room, but I mean, there was at least an extra, 30 to 50 feet of wiggle room
yeah,
in difference. But it was absolutely crazy. Just going through that entire tunnel system and making sure that you actually went into the right exit. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, because I almost messed that up the first time around. And but yeah, it was super strange. But con crud aside, or what's it called, Conthrax?
Well, they call it contracts. I've always heard it called like, oh, you've got the crud or the con crud.
Yeah.
Um, I remember going to like New York Comic Con and like going to the Javits Center, and this was like pre-COVID.
Mhm.
So I mean, I remember being in there and like everyone was sick like after that because it's like you're literally shoulder to shoulder
Yeah.
trying to move through to get to either Artist Alley or go upstairs or downstairs to where they were doing the panels. So if you've ever been somewhere and want to see an impressive like situation, go to New York Comic Con in the Javits Center and see like how massive that is. Besides that and C2E2 in Chicago, I mean, it's amazing like how big those convention centers like really are. And they're like probably 2 or 3 times bigger than the one we were in Baltimore.
Yeah.
So I mean massive, just massive places.
But
So
I will say this though. I mean, of course, C2E2 has kind of been shifting outside of comics and more into pop culture stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course New York has, I don't know, within the last however long, it's kind of been 50-50 with comics and pop culture. And but yeah, I mean they are massive conventions, they really are. But with Baltimore, it's just the biggest comic focused convention on the East Coast, and so it was definitely a lot of fun, just doing that, and trying not to have a certain person sneeze and cough in my left ear, and
Yeah, that was yeah, you got it really bad. At least me and my wife had your body to be there like as like a shield to like block us from like the constant like sneezing
man,
that
I
he
was
was
cannon
doing.
fodder from that guy.
Oh, you were. I mean, I mean, he totally like sneezed a lot in your direction. So like, I don't know if you made him mad or like because you kept like eating some of his candy in the candy bowl that he had because it was Halloween weekend.
Well, he was giving that stuff out for free. It was just
I
like,
know,
yeah,
but
we're not going to eat it all or
it's probably why he
whatever.
got sick. Is because he was sneezing and then he was passing out candy. So that so yeah, that's probably how you got sick because you were eating his all snot candy.
Trying to censor myself right now. Candy was wrapped, okay? It was fine.
Yeah, the thing about it, you had to like touch and open the wrapper
Shut
up and
up.
like then put it in your mouth and then it was like, and I'm sure a couple of times when you went to put like the candy in your mouth, it like he sneezed. So I mean, yeah,
Yeah. No, I think the only it was weird because like after I think that was his wife that was with him the first 2 days.
it was either the wife or the president of the company that he worked with.
Yeah. It was like after she left that Sunday, it was just like negative Nancy the entire day. It was just like,
Yeah, he had a
I don't
bad day
understand
that
why I'm not
day.
getting sales. I don't understand why I'm not doing this, that, and the other. Well, I mean, you kind of have to like put yourself out there and network with whoever happens to be an editor at so and so, have a portfolio on you. But anyways, that was last year. This is
Yeah.
this year, and we're going to start with a little Q&A. So, nothing embarrassing,
Oh,
unfortunately.
that's good.
Yeah. First question. How old were you when you started, I guess, getting into comics more than, I guess, drawing comics, but definitely, like what grabbed you at what age in terms of like comics?
I mean, probably, gosh, I mean, probably the first comic that me and my identical twin brother Ryan that we ended up getting had to have been. You remember the Batman movie with like it was Batman and Robin,
Okay.
the one with Two Face and Jim Carrey. They made
Yeah.
a comic version of that for the film, and I don't know how we found it, but we got that, and then we also what did my wife say?
Definitely ask him something embarrassing.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that, honey. Because I know you're downstairs watching. But like it I think it came from that. I know like where I grew up at in rural North Carolina, we didn't have comic shops. Like I remember I could go to the grocery store and they would like have the spinner rack. But most of what they had the spinner rack was like Betty and Veronica or like Archie. And like I love Archie. I grew up reading Archie and like Betty and Veronica, the Sonic the Hedgehog comics that came out then, and then Cartoon Network released a line of comics. So we got that and like the even at the pharmacy, the drugstore, local drugstore in town we grew up in, they had a spinner rack. Um, it wasn't until I went down to Atlantic Beach in North Carolina, they had a small comic shop. And the guy, because this is like after 9/11, and he
Right.
was ranting and raving about the black cover that had come out for 9/11, where they had like
Oh, the Spider-Man issue.
the Spider-Man issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because like he was talking about it, he's like, they made Doom cry. And it was like Dr. Doom doesn't cry. And like it was just really it was just interesting as a kid, like going in there because I mean, of course, everyone lived through 9/11 and stuff like that, but seeing it represented in a comic and it being talked about that much. So I guess that was kind of our first exposure. Besides that, it would have been like the whole Fox TV lineup when they had like Batman. Well, yeah, well, no, it was
Yeah,
Warner Brothers when they had like Batman the animated series. Because like,
yeah.
man, we grew up on like watching that like Saturday morning and like everything. Like whenever it was on, we were constantly glued to the screen, like watching that. So,
That to this day is like top tier uh, animated series.
oh yeah,
It was just the animation was perfect. The music score was perfect. The script writing was perfect. Everything about that show, even though it was directed towards kids, it was just absolutely top tier storytelling. And now they're actually continuing on the animated series in
mm,
comic book form. I haven't read any of it yet. I know that it's been well received. But everything that uh, Paul Dini and Bruce Timm have done with that, with the Superman cartoon, then leading to the
right.
Justice League stuff, that's been some of the best storytelling I've seen with any of those characters. But yeah, so I was way too young to be left alone in a comic book store. There was one in town, but it was weird. So I had to be everywhere. Whenever my mom would be going somewhere, obviously I was a minor, so it's just like I had to be with her.
Right.
But when we're in the grocery store, she could either Kroger's actually, she could leave me at the newsstand or in the VCR rental area, and she knows that I would weigh anchor, not move. I'm zoned in to whatever it is that I'm looking at, and she was right. And of course, the '90s was a different era. You
Oh,
can actually leave
totally.
your
Yeah.
yeah, you can leave your kid unattended, and
Yeah.
everything should be okay. Um, wasn't exactly the best parenting skill, but I love my mom. So,
Oh yeah. Well, I
uh,
mean, my parents were the same way. I mean, we could go outside and play, and like, well, they tell you when it got dark, come back inside.
yeah,
And they knew where we were, and this is like pre cell phone, so like they couldn't automatically call and get somebody. I mean, so yeah, I mean, I remember those days, but kind of
yeah.
like you, I mean, I will go to there was a food like grocery store called Foodorama down in Mania, North Carolina. It's still there and
Futurama.
called Foodorama, and they had a spinner rack with a bunch of comics, and I think that was maybe the first time that I had seen like I know probably a Fantastic Four comic was on like one of those spinner racks that it
Right.
was there at the Foodorama, and this was like way back in like the '90s and like early 2000s. So, but yeah, it's like you go into grocery stores now, you don't even see spinner racks anymore. I mean,
No, you'll see like tabloids and maybe a National Geographic, but that's basically it. Do
yeah,
you actually remember the first comic book that you ever bought, or you or your brother had bought?
like you mean from like a comic book shop?
From a shop, from the spinner rack, in general.
I mean, probably the first comic I bought from like the spinner rack would probably be an Archie comic. It was probably Betty and Veronica. Or and that sounds really weird to say as a man. But I mean, they're funny. I
Yeah,
mean, when like I loved Archie and like Betty and Veronica and like Jughead. I mean, they were great and they're really funny. So like I would pick those up and read that, and then was like, of course, we got older and realized like, oh, there's superhero comics for all this stuff. Because when we used to go to Toys R Us, you could buy like like three for $1. They're like the bags. Yeah,
yeah.
you remember those? They used to be on the end of the toy aisle, and I remember me and my brother would go with my grandma, and we'd have a certain amount of money, and then we would like flip through them and try to like, oh, we don't have this issue, or there's a Spider-Man, and like these were like random issues, like
Right.
none of them were cohesive at all. I mean, they must have been like left over from like sometime in the '90s for all the excessive reprints that they had. So like we would dive in and read those. But the first time that like I ever remember going to like what we would call a comic book shop, it was in Wilson, North Carolina. It was called the Hobby Shop. They sold comics, toys, Pokemon cards, and like hobby like model kits and Boy Scout stuff. They do like Magic the Gathering in the back. They would do like Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, Pokemon tournaments, and they had a wall of comics, and you could go in and you could actually. That's where my first pull list came from. Was from that store in Wilson. It's no longer there anymore. The husband and wife team that owned it, they divorced, and God bless his wife Sue. She tried to run it at the end, and it just didn't work out, unfortunately. But she's still around, and I miss that shop. Like, I mean, that was the first comic shop. Like, I bought Batman Year One from there. I bought Watchmen from there. And I think it's really funny because her Sue's husband at the time, Derek, he wouldn't let me buy Watchmen, and because I could drive. At this point, I could drive myself. So like I was at least 16,
Yeah.
17, and he's like, "I'm not gonna sell it you until you're like 18 years old because of what's gonna." I was like, dude, it cannot have anything worse in it than I can't see on HBO. So I was like, he's like, "Oh, that's a fair point." And then like, so I went in there a day he wasn't in there, and I bought it from his wife. So
Oh.
yeah, because Sue had enough trust in all the kids that went to that store that she knew what with whatever we bought, that whatever was in that store would not hurt us and wouldn't give us nightmares or anything like that.
Right.
And so I bought it, and I went home, and like I fell in love with the world of Alan Moore. Like with everything he's ever written, I've always like tried to hunt it down because like I think Watchmen really kicked that off because I was used to like reading, Batman and Spider-Man and Iron Man at the time, but I was like, there's so much more here. And he did that in Watchmen.
Yeah.
And kind of like Frank Miller did the same thing in Batman Year One. Um, it's just like it kind of like
Yeah.
blew my mind and like opened the doors up to like everything like comic book related and stuff. So, and now like every time like I go, I mean, now we can buy comics pretty much from anywhere. I still go to a local shop. We can get over to Amazon and buy it. But now I'm like hunting for collections that like they're not in trade anymore. They're like older editions that came out maybe in early 2000, and they just don't, they're not collected anymore. So I'm having to go to eBay, or I go to my local shop and ask Yord, like, "Hey Yord, can you find like this specific issue or these issues because I need to read them because of some idea that I've cooked up in my brain, that maybe a story for DC or like something that sparked my mind that I want to just read more about from a certain issue."
Right.
So
So the first comic that I technically didn't buy it. I was like 5 years old. So you can obviously guess no money. But
right.
one of my youngest of the two older sisters, she was with me and she knew that I wanted to buy this Tarzan comic. It was actually Tarzan versus Predator. Issue
Oh,
one. Issue one, Dark Horse.
wow.
And I was way too young to be reading that in the first place, because there is a page in there where Tarzan actually comes across this village. It's completely, like a ghost town.
Mhm.
He walks into a hut, and you can't really you see the silhouette of a body hanging from the rafters, and there's obviously blood, coming down, all this sort of stuff. Typical Predator nonsense. So came back from Kroger's, and I'm reading this thing. I'm like, oh, cool, sort of thing. You got to keep in mind, I'm the same 5-year-old kid who has been watching Ghostbusters, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Last Crusade, Legend.
Right.
Um, so anything from the 80s era VHS, yeah, I'll just hone in on it. And of course, obviously, Transformers, and G.I. Joe, and
Oh yeah.
Voltron, and all of that. But so I my sister Miriam had said, just like, yeah, I also bought Tom a comic because he was at the newsstand. So she goes, oh, what comic was it? Oh, it's Tarzan. So my mom was interested because it's just like, oh, Tarzan, Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Right.
Sees the comic and she's like, wait a second, flips through it. She goes, you bought the of course, unfortunately it does end up in the garbage, and never see it ever again. But uh but that didn't stop my mom from going to the newsstand and sitting and reading comics and stuff like that. So I had my first taste of Wizard magazine, of Toy Fair. um Even though I was way too young to be reading a couple of the Dark Horse stuff,
Right.
even the Starship Troopers comic that came out, because the movie came out at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I had read the book in middle school, and so it's just like, oh, there's a movie, I can't watch it because it's rated R, and then the comic is here, and so I'm sitting in the newsstand and I'm reading it, and of course it gets to the scene where the accidental fire comes in,
Hmm.
and I'm like, so it was my first time seeing half of a dude's head in a comic book. Uh, it was so I'm pretty sure people that are watching it is just like, where are they printing in comics these days? I'm like,
Yeah.
this is the 90s. Um, so yeah, I mean, so there was one particular storyline that still to this day kind of stuck with me, and it was the Captain America series. I want to say that it was Mark Waid that wrote it. I'm not 100% positive on it, but I know that Andy Cooper did all the panels for it.
Hmm.
And so it's a Captain America series. Apparently, his shield had shattered, and Tony had rebuilt him a prototype laser shield.
Oh, yeah, I
So,
remember that, like,
yeah,
vaguely.
so he was able to like throw slash aim and shoot the shield out, but still get it back without
Right.
hurting himself, because science. And so he was this is the whole thing with like him and Sharon Carter doing adventures together. But the comic starts off really interesting. It starts off with Red Skull. He's living this Matrix Groundhog Day kind of scenario because he's trapped in the Tesseract. And so basically he's a servant, he's a bellhop in a hotel, and he's like living this nightmare where he's treated less than nothing or whatever. So it's almost like his punishment for how he's treated people as a Nazi.
Yeah.
So and then he somehow realizes who he actually is, that he's stuck in the Tesseract, and somehow is able to get out of the Tesseract.
Hmm.
So he alters history. So he ends up altering history, and you've got all these like proto neo Nazis and uh, Stark suits basically taking over Washington D.C. and America and all this sort of stuff, and Steve is just like, how did this happen? Red Skull's supposed to be dead and gone, and
Right.
then the Watcher kind of chimes in and goes like, so this is what actually happens. Now, obviously, because I'm the Watcher, I can't do anything, but that doesn't mean that I can't point you in the right direction. Hence, hence. Typical Watcher stuff. And
Yeah.
so then you find out the Watcher isn't the Watcher. It's actually Kang.
Really. Hmm.
It's Kang in disguise. So he like somehow like some sort of like cloaking whatever, and you find out that it's actually Kang, and he wants the Tesseract for himself. So boots out Red Skull, so now he is able to take over history. But it goes into this whole thing where like somehow Stark kind of pulls a Doctor Strange by like repeating himself in separate timelines and realities, where he's trying to go against Kang
Hmm.
to stop everything from happening and bringing it back. And then it ends somehow with Red Skull getting sucked back into his Matrix penance, basically.
Hmm.
It was so interesting. I remember reading several issues of that, and I actually did find a Masterworks collection of it for like $25, I think.
That's not bad.
No, it's really not that bad at all. And yeah, so I found it actually, I want to say about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I remember sitting down recently and reading it after buying it. And I'm like, this is exactly as I remember it when I was like, 11, 12 years old. But I didn't actually start buying, single floppy comics because I had been suckered into getting into manga when I was in middle
Right.
school. And of course, this is when Sci-Fi Network was airing a lot of OVAs and full-length movies. So I saw Venus Wars, the Street Fighter movie, Akira, Project
Wasn't
A.
that like at midnight? Then
Oh, they did this on Saturday mornings, and
Saturday
they did
mornings.
this for like maybe about like a 5, 6 hour stretch.
Hmm.
So they did that for maybe about 3, 4 years, and then they stopped doing it. And another, I think it was HBO that took over doing that, and they did that at night because they had the Spawn serial still
Yeah.
going. But Cartoon Network was just starting Toonami.
Yeah, I remember Toonami because that's how I got introduced to Dragon Ball Z, and
Yeah.
because at one time Toonami was also doing GI Joe.
Mhm.
They were playing that, and I'm trying to remember what else they were playing on. Because I just remember watching all of Dragon Ball
Yeah.
on Toonami. I remember watching that.
They had Robotech at the very beginning,
Hmm.
and of course Voltron for a little bit. Then they stopped that. They kept on with Robotech for as long as they could possibly take it.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I really don't know how the science works in terms of, at least back then, how they were able to know who was watching what at what time in terms of viewership and time slots and stuff. So they knew exactly which series and which that were popping off, and then everyone was just logging out of it and then coming back and whatever. So they knew that Dragon Ball was catching on. They knew that Sailor Moon was catching on,
Yeah.
and so they were just like, okay, so people aren't wanting certain shows, so they took certain stuff off, and that's when they started introducing in Gundam Wing.
Yeah. I remember Gundam.
And for the very first time, this was when I was in 8th grade. That's when they showed the Endless Waltz movie because they were trying to lap over Toonami onto Saturday mornings, and they call it the Rising Sun.
Yep, I do remember that.
And
Gosh, it's
the
been forever
Yeah,
ago.
and
Yeah.
the first thing of Rising Sun was the Endless Waltz film. So I remember sitting down for the hour and a half watching that for the first time, and I was just like, why are there commercials?
Yeah, I remember watching Tenchi Muyo. Do you remember watching that?
Yes.
Yeah, Tenchi was like me and my brother, we loved that show. And like I remember going to like it had to have been Barnes and Nobles or maybe Books a Million at the time. Because where we were in the South, like we didn't really have a Borders Books or anywhere nearby. I just remember like Books a Million and like
Yeah.
Barnes and Noble. I remember finding the manga um in the I think it was in the comic section. I want to say it was, but I remember like it was so tiny. It's nowhere near how it is now. Like when you
Yeah.
go, it's like wall to wall, which is fantastic. But like I remember like just trying to find it. Like you were lucky if you found like one copy, and it may have been like issue 3 out of like the series, and it
Yeah.
was just randomly on the shelf.
Yeah. And then you would
So
have to go and order it at the
yeah.
customer service desk and all of that. So, fun fact: Books a Million was actually founded in Alabama.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, not a lot of
Huh.
people know that. I didn't know that until I actually started slinging coffee at Joe inside of Joe Muggs in Books a Million.
Huh.
Because for the longest, I thought it was a New York, type company or whatever. It
Yeah.
made sense, and then it was just like, no, it actually founded it in Florence, Alabama. So I'm like, oh, so it's not just music that happens in the Muscle Shoals. So, um, so yeah, the so yeah, Books a Million was the first time that I actually saw manga being
Hmm.
sold in a bookstore.
Yep.
So that was my introduction to reading Guyver. That was my introduction to reading a Korean comic called Ragnarok, which was a really weird but interesting mix of Norse mythology, Korean mythology, and like tabletop RPG elements.
That sounds really cool, though.
Yeah, well, apparently it's a online. It actually is like an online like World of Warcraft kind of thing,
Oh, okay.
or something like that. And it has been for years. And the creator who created the whole storyline was just like, let's turn it into the comic form. Let's have like an actual baseline story. And so it was really interesting. Unfortunately, they only released 10 issues. Tokyo Pop only released 10 issues of that. There were supposed to be a few more. So I have all 10 of them in my collection. Every now and then I will pick that up because there'll be like a specific character design or a monster design that kind of like pops in my head. I'm just like, I need something that kind of does this and that and the other. So
Right.
when I was working on the Witchblade earlier this morning, I was thinking about what was it? It was part of the armor design because I was compositing a couple different things because I was thinking like Mark Silvestri's character design, and there was a couple character designs that Adam Hughes did, and then I was mashing that together. But then I took the bottom half from a character design from one of the characters from Ragnarok and just kind of smatter it because the whole biomechanical thing, it made sense. So
Yeah.
it worked. So, but yeah, that was basically that. So I didn't really start buying actual comics probably until when the MCU started. Uh, so got a couple extra people popping in the chat. Wait, seriously, I think you may have been talking about Jay. Are you referring to when I was talking about Books A Million being founded in Florence? It's a true story. So they actually moved the home office from Florence to Birmingham.
Okay.
So that's where it's at right now. Makes sense. It's a larger city now. Here, brother, better late than never.
Yeah, that's my buddy Turner from back home. Hey, Turner.
All right. Looks like we got Miriam Creech, Marcy Beeman.
That's my mom.
Hello, mums.
Yep.
And Oakley and Rockwell.
Yep. Raquel, she's a friend of ours. We were actually watching her two dogs this weekend while she was out of town with her husband for his birthday. So happy birthday, Austin, because his birthday's tomorrow.
All
If he's
right.
watching, he's probably asleep, but it's all right.
If you can narrow it down to 5 people, who would you consider to be your, if not comic influences, then maybe art influences?
Gosh, why do you have to ask me that? That's like so hard, man.
I know, but it's a
Uh,
tough question. It's leading into the easy ones.
I mean, of course, Jack Kirby, Alex Toth, Joe Kubert, Paulo Rivera, and I would really also say Daniel Warren Johnson is also up there pretty high, and so is great. I'm going to blank on his name, and I feel really dumb about blanking on his name. Is the guy who did Ultra Mega?
Oh, James Herron.
James Herron. Yep.
Which
I like. I would say right now that the biggest thing is like I'm trying to understand how Daniel Warren Johnson draws, because like and even when how Warren draws too, because when they draw, they he's not really he's going for emotion, and I know
Yeah.
that's it's like he's going for action and emotion, and I want to try to put that in my work, like at least more, because if you read the Stretcher Bears, one review that I was given, and I think it's funny. It's like Archie goes off to war, and I was like, somehow Archie always bleeds in from here. It bleeds out through here, And I guess it's just like from having read Archie. Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, it's kind of Archie-esque in a
Yeah.
way. So I'm like, well, I like Archie, but I'm like, how can I give it more emotion? How can I? Because I want to make you feel something. I mean, when you read the Stretcher Bears, yes, you're going to feel something, but I want the artwork to give you more than maybe what the words and the text can give you. And it's like it's trying to find that balance, man. I mean, you know, from yourself as an artist, I mean, it's so difficult because like we always self-critique and we're our own worst critic,
Yeah.
um, more than anything. And I'm just trying to figure out, okay, how can I make this look atomically correct in a way, but also make it emote?
Mhm.
And so it kind of gives the page life. Like my mentor, Mike Lilly's really good at that. I always say that he's the master of action lines because if you look at anything that Mike Lilly's ever done, he also did Project Superpowers for Dynamite Comics, and
Okay.
I
Yeah.
I I love his stuff. Like he never wastes a detail, and there's always something dynamic action happening. It literally is like the page is moving, and Daniel Warren Johnson can do that too. And I'm like, a lot of times when I look at my own work, I don't see that, and I want to see that. So it's trying to like find that balance of like trying to find that in the work, and
So
it's just, I guess it's like translating from up here into the hand,
yeah.
essentially.
So what's interesting about guys
And
like
speaking of that, since it's been 42 minutes, I'm probably gonna start drawing something because I feel
yeah,
bad
go
for people that turned in to like want to see me draw something, and so
ahead.
I'm not ignoring you. I can still hear you. So
Right, yeah. No, totally fine. Um, speaking of guys like Daniel Warren Johnson, like Tyler Herron and or sorry, James Herron and Tyrell Cannon, that's another guy who kind of falls in the same vein. Those guys
yeah,
are just they are able to create this action and motion that within the panels. And of course, most of it really does come from the fact that they're about as equally as influenced with Western art as they are with a lot of Japanese art and even French comics too. They just somehow happen to have this interesting hybrid of stuff. And the thing that gets me the most is whenever Johnson is drawing, he uses the heaviest lead possible and slaps the ink on, but then he starts correcting the lines with like whatever white ink that he's doing, and somehow it's just like I see it but it looks messy, and then he starts correcting everything down. It's like, oh, there's the picture. But
yeah. And like you said, it's like that a lot of artists, because he's even talked about it, like Donnie Cates and Ryan Otley, his style, like Daniel Warren Johnson's style, is like messy, and there's really nothing else. Like they're like it shouldn't look as good as it does because how messy it is, and it's not like I'm saying it's bad, but it's I don't know, it's kind of like a compliment in a way,
yeah,
you know, from like looking at it, that like how messy that how messy that it can be. And if that makes any sense. I
yeah,
know that's kind of like it may not make sense, but yeah. So because I keep going back to the reference that I've got on my phone, and for some reason that it wants to leave the screen semi. So if they can bear with me for a minute, so I can like at least sketch a little bit of like what I want it to look like.
yeah.
So
It'll just be like a magic show. Now
yeah,
you see
I
it, now you
know.
know.
Yeah, I try not to do that though, but I should have really like because I always use like reference, at
Yeah,
least a little piece of reference because um I don't know, like I've talked to like Neil Adams a bunch, like back when he was around, and he always used reference. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a time where he didn't use reference. So and like reference is like so important, like with whatever everything that we do, and I'm not happy with that. So I'll flip that over. But with like the reference that he would have, because I've got a book over there on my shelf that I can't. It's about Norman Rockwell, and maybe it's like behind. It's called Behind the Camera. And if you get the book, it's got all the
Yeah,
pictures that he took as reference. And like he took them of real people in his town that grew up around his studio and stuff. And he used a projector and he would project the image onto the canvas. And that's how he would paint. That's how he painted so quickly, is that he used reference. Now, that doesn't diminish what he did
yeah,
because he's a gorgeous painter. But if he never had that reference, he definitely couldn't turn out as many Saturday, no, well, the post editions that he did. He couldn't have turned them out so quickly. That's how he was
yeah.
able to do it. He had reference.
Well, when you think about all this, like, giant murals, I mean, people basically had to, like, print it out on like acetate and then project it onto a wall. And of course, depending on how big the projector screen is and how far back away it was, also depended on, the angle of, you know, whatever it is that they're trying to project, that they can, paint over it,
Right.
which,
I'm
perfect
ready to
example.
I'm listening to him. He's gonna
Okay.
grab
Uh,
something.
Gotcha. Yeah, perfect example. If you ever get a chance, you being whoever it is that's watching it, if you ever get a chance to, type in on YouTube to watch the Lincoln Park Meteora documentary, it's probably not even 15 minutes long, but they actually talk about trying to do the album artwork, and they actually did like basically a collaboration jam process. And there's a portion of it where they actually did that. One of the artists did something on acetate and put it on a projector, bounced it onto a wall so it's to scale to where he wanted it to be, and then was able to correctly put down the paint, the lines they went to, which I think the majority of those guys were using spray paint, which is just you have to have like a surgeon's hand to make those super clean, crisp lines whenever using, spray paint and airbrush. But since I see you with a pencil, it kind of leads to the next question. If you're limited to just either one pencil and or one pen, what would it be?
It would probably be. I mean, sometimes when I draw at home, like I'll use like this. It's an erasable like red. It's like a teacher pencil. So basically, it's like a red leaded ink. Sometimes I'll use this, or I'll use a blue one. And if I had to grab anything, it would probably be like one of these Pentel pens that I have, and like
Yeah,
probably in like a point 0.5 or a point 0.4. I mean, that's what I've been trying to do, is like trying to reduce the amount of like stuff I have to carry when I go to shows. Because like if it's just me and I'm going to a show, it kills my back, and I don't want to like try to like kill the person I'm with, namely my brother or my wife, and having to help me like lug all this stuff um like onto the convention floor. So I mean, I'm trying to reduce it for as much as I can put on my back. And that's primarily when if I had to use it, I mean, heck, even a regular number two pencil, I could still do what I'm doing with a regular
yeah.
pencil and a regular like ink pen that you could probably get from like any, I don't know, like any store or anything. You can even take it from a hotel room, because I think that's what Frank Cho started doing for a lot of his women pinups. Then
Oh,
he
the
just started using like cheap
ballpoints,
ballpoint pens. Yeah. So
which he actually released an entire book of all the ballpoint stuff that he's done, and apparently there's like a tutorial or something like that that's in the book explaining his process and how he, you know here's your, cheap crap, what are they called? Bic pens?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's just, he basically buys like a pack of like 50 of them and then just uses one until it's dried up and then repeats process. But uh, even with cheap ballpoint pens, you still run the risk of like the possibility of ink accidentally kind of like barfing out of it. So he has like another sheet of paper on hand where he just kind of like tries to get most of that crud off before he continues on. But let's see. So here's one that's a little bit out of left field. Uh, According to your bio on your website, you did trading card art for Dynamite.
Yep.
How did that come about?
That ended up coming about that my buddy Mike Lilly again, he was telling me that he's like, well, he said if you need just a way to get like an extra credit of your name, that he knew a guy who worked with Dynamite and like who there's basically like one guy that deals with the trading cards.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, here, I'll give you his email. And then I didn't realize at the time that you had to respond to the email. I thought he just like once you send the email to him and said hello, that he would just start sending you stuff. So what happened is that I actually had to like say when they announced a project, I'd be like, hey, I'm interested in this, and then tell them like how many number of cards that I wanted to do. So I think for the number of Red Sonja cards, I think I did maybe 50 or 100, and some of them were like matching cards. So they were like artist edition cards that basically, if you put four of them together, they would make a scene. So it could be like Red Sonja fighting a bunch of monsters, or like Red Sonja riding a horse. And I ended up doing that, and COVID happened. And when COVID happened, everything shut down. And when everything
Right.
shut down, I just sitting there turning out cards. And that was while I was working on Stretcher Bears. And so I send these cards off when I get finished. And I never hear anything from them. After that, it was like, did you get them? Like, yeah, we got them. Everything looks great. And then I'm like, okay. And then it's like, well, you're gonna pay me, right? And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and I wait some more. And I'm like, hey, I haven't received anything. And they were like, well, let me check whether we sent it out. I didn't get it. And I'm like, well, I'm getting ready to move. I'm moving from Florida to South Carolina, where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can you check with them? And they're like, yeah. I was like, well, we sent you. Then I wait a couple days to hear back from them. It's like, oh, we're gonna send you another check, and like it'll be there. Well, when will it be there? And like it'll be there in a couple days. I move nothing. I forward everything through the mail, nothing. I have yet to get paid from those cards.
I'm sorry about that.
So I mean, I don't do trade cards anymore because
I
of
should
that.
probably think about these questions before I start asking them.
I'm not bitter in any way, if you can't tell. So like I I don't know, man. It's kind of like it's been so long now after it. It's kind of like at least the cards made it out. Like
Yeah.
I actually looked online a couple months ago. I was like, did they even like really get out there in the public? And they did. So like there's a solicit that if you go from Previews magazine, that my name is listed. If you do Dynamite, trading cards, Red Sonja, She Devil, Reid Beaman, it'll pull up, and it pulls up the previews ad for the solicit of those cards.
Huh.
And I'm still waiting to go to a show and somebody bring me a stack of those cards, because on the back of those cards, each of them were signed with a different colored pen. So like they became collectible. So there's a huge trading card community in the comic book industry that if you really like a character, I mean, they even do like Betty Page cards and stuff, that they'll like the collectors will try to collect certain runs of certain artists.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for that day that someone comes up to me and's like, I have all these Red Sonja cards. And I'm like, I cannot believe you collected them all. Congratulations. I mean, because that's what my buddy Mike Lilly had done. Is that he had done a couple of the cards too. And he was doing the Betty Page ones, but of course he's more well known than I am. So of course, like he's got collectors that are after like his work. So like he's actually able to like see that these guys have like come in and they've like collected full runs of like Betty Page and stuff like that.
Right.
So I mean it's cool. I mean it's a good way to get your name out there in the beginning. Um I don't know, man. It was just something to do, and it just happened at the really worst time in history,
Right. Yeah.
and that made it tough for everybody. So I don't know like how much of it is actually like Dynamite's fault and how much of it's the pandemic's fault. You know,
Yeah.
because like we're still seeing ripple effects of the pandemic now, and it's kind of like, well, why am I gonna? I mean, I don't know, because I'm not the first person in the comic book industry to not get paid. I mean, look at all the people that have gotten the shaft from everything that happened with Aftershock, and I feel terrible for them. And just that waiting game of having to see like, what's going to happen. How am I going to get paid? How am I going to get this money? How am I going to pay my mortgage?
Yeah.
And I feel for those guys in the industry because comics isn't an easy field. I mean, at all. I mean, with royalties and stuff like that, I mean, it's not like we're living in a gold mine here. So, unless you like create a character or unless you're like Stan Lee, chances are you're not going to see that money for a while.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I was talking with someone around the end of last year about because I knew that they did trading cards for Marvel, because apparently they still pump those things out. And I was
They,
just like,
yeah,
hey,
they
I'm
still do.
curious about this. So he gave me all the information on it, and so it's just like, interesting. Of course, the fact of like they were wanting, well, actually, it wasn't specifically Marvel per se. It was what's the name of that company? Upper Deck.
Yeah, Upper Deck. Yeah,
Yeah. So it was just like they were wanting, you to do somewhere between like 80 to 100 cards, but then they also have like a list of like characters that you can't do. And part of it is because, like, let's say for instance, you can't do Invisible Woman because you have these people that are like sending in a blank card and saying, "Oh, it's Invisible Woman, can't you tell?" So
someone's done that. You know that they
yeah,
have.
apparently someone has, and of course, other stuff like, they get so many of like one specific character and just like, okay, for this thing, we're not allowing newer people to do this character, but we'll hire someone else to do the character for this card, or if it's like an exclusive thing or whatever. So I mean, that part makes sense. Um, but going back to Stretcher Bearers, so you did this comic with your twin brother Ryan.
Mhm. Yep.
How was it like working with your brother?
Um.
Be honest.
Well, I
Be
mean,
real.
I
Rip it
couldn't
off
have.
like a band-aid.
Yeah, I couldn't. Well, I couldn't have done it without him. That's for sure. Because
Okay.
like doing, no one starts out wanting like I'm going to do a 120-page comic. Like no one starts out thinking like that. And like I needed help. I needed another brain that would work as hard as I would work. And he's that person. Like when I compare him to anything, I'm like Jack Kirby and he's like Stan Lee. We work together and we work together really well. Um, and I mean, we're practically the same person, and genetically, we're practically the same person too, except for one chromosome difference. But I mean, he can look at something differently than I can, and he could add to what I'm doing. He can maybe give it a different perspective. I mean, he was also co-author on the book too.
Yeah.
Besides doing the research, he also was my letterer, so he was able to letter it. So I was able to draw it and digitally ink it and color it. So without him, it probably wouldn't have got done. I mean, the rest of the stuff that I was able to do, I tried to handle most of it because like he was still being a nurse at the time, and he still is a nurse now. It's just that like he was trying to do comic book stuff on top of like doing the regular stuff that he had during the day. So he was coming home and like he was tired. So like he was falling asleep at night lettering. Yeah, that happened several times. And I'd say, "Hey, you get this page in?" He's like, "No, I fell asleep." Like lettering. And he's like, "Then there's a bunch of Z's that just showed up, or a bunch of like N's or M's." And I was like, "Go to bed." And I was like, he's like, "With the comics, I was like, it'll be fine." It's like, "Go to bed." And so it's just like he found a way. We found a way to make it work, and we couldn't have done it. Yep, and there he is right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
he did a lot of work. So, and it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't always easy work to do it, but I mean, it was fun. It was a lot of fun to do it. And I mean, I definitely. I mean, we work better as a team with everything that we do.
So the research that both of you guys did was just absolutely impressive, to the fact
Thanks.
that, this is technically a biography in comic form. It's, day by day occurrence with these four guys from North Carolina overseas during World War One, to the day account, to the weather. Um, it's just the research that you guys had to do, that had to have been just a massive undertaking.
Well, it started out when we were doing the research. I think the number of books became 15 to 20 books. And some of those books I did Audible. So like I could audio listen to them while I drew. Um so like we had like the story that was basically like in our heads of like what we wanted to do, and then we could basically kind of like add to it, change what we needed to change. Because when I pitched to Gary and them at Dead Reckoning, I had an idea of what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to. Okay, Ryan said it was 20, so yeah, it
Yeah.
was 20. And luckily enough, there's also a lot historically available online, especially through the Library of Congress and through the military, like itself. For like they kept amazing files for every engagement
I would hope
that
so.
we've been in. Yeah, I mean, statistics, numbers, like anything you can imagine. Like that's why we were able to get the weather reports. And Ryan did a lot of that research because I wanted it to be historically accurate as possible. That's what we sold the book on, and we had to deliver. And I can tell you, it was one of the biggest pains in the ass. And I say that with love because, like, there's never been a comic like that does day by day. The only other comics that I can find are French, and a lot of the French ones they're over on my shelf over there. I can't really see the name of it, but there's some really good European comics that have been written as day by day accounts. And a really good one was Charlie's War. It was a
I've heard about this.
newspaper. Yeah, it was a newspaper strip um, that ran in England, and you can still find a collection of it now.
Yeah.
And it's some gorgeous, terrifying artwork. Um, but a lot of inspiration too came from like Joe Kubert. Like I really love the Unknown Soldier. So
Mhm.
like I would have that. I've got like a sideshow showcase of that, and then like Men at War and stuff like that, and like all the old Wally Wood stuff that he did when he did like the war books and stuff for EC. So it all came from that. But yeah, we wanted to try to make it historically accurate as possible because that's what we sold it on.
Yeah, so I've actually just recently found out about Charlie's War.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny part is that I was actually trying to look up through Amazon. There's a French artist. His name's Olivier Ledreau,
Mm-hmm.
and apparently he did this. It's really hard to find like a specific genre because it's like it's going into it. It goes into like realms of like fantasy, sci-fi, or sorry, dark fantasy, horror. The whole thing is basically vampires for the most part. I remember reading a couple of chapters of his work in Heavy Metal magazine, probably over a decade ago, and his art just resurfaces probably about a couple times a year on Twitter. And so I was just like, oh, see if I can find, volume one of this. And unless you have like Kindle or Comixology, that's the only way you can get it, unless you know French. So it's just like, well, this sucks. But when I was looking at like the recommendations on Amazon, it's just like, oh, you like this, and you'll like Charlie's War, and I'm like, what is this? So click on that, and that's how I found out about that. So I'm like, so it's interesting that you brought that up. But going into, I guess the research and splitting the duties up and trying to piece all this stuff together, how'd you go about hooking up with Dead Reckoning to get this thing out in the public?
Well, how that all happened is that when I would go to Heroes Con, I met Gary Thompson, who was the editor, Dead Reckoning at the time, and he saw a Sergeant Rock that I had illustrated, and he was like, "Are you interested in war comics?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, and we talked. We got along really well about like just talk on the subject of war and history, because he's a big history buff himself, and we started a friendship. And he's like, "Well, if you got any ideas, shoot them my way." And so I had an idea. It was called Air Aces, and you can kind of see the beginnings of that on my website. And it's like basically like World War One, like fighter pilots
Yeah, the Flying
and
Ace.
the Flying Aces. Yeah, and I got to the point I didn't really. It's cool to do planes, but at the same time, you're not seeing the real horror that goes on the ground,
Yeah.
and that's what I kind of wanted to do. And so I was like, hey, I have this idea about stretcher bears because it hadn't been like, it's so difficult to find any historical like account evidence from a stretcher bear's perspective because they witnessed such horrible stuff. Plus the death rate was really high.
Mm.
Like, you running out there picking up somebody, you're getting shot at by the Germans, a shell comes down. I mean, chances are you're going to die too. So it was collecting the information that was there from accounts of people that were lived long enough that could give the account, and that we were able to take that information and turn it into like a hypothetical story, but still make it where the unit was real, the battle was real, the weather was real. The only thing that didn't exist was those four guys. But it's a composite of different soldiers' experiences of what they experienced during the Battle of the Meuse Argonne. So we were kind of able to do that with it. It was a lot of work. I I met Gary and he loved the idea, and I mean we kind of went with it, and God bless him for that. I Dead Reckoning and everything he did holds a special place in my heart, and I hate it more than anything that Dead Reckoning is not what it was now from what it was when I started with
Mm.
them. Because with everything that happened with COVID, they're not accepting any submissions now. And I mean, the Beat reported on that a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So, I was doing research for another war book that was taking place in World War II. I'm looking at about 15 books on my bookshelf. And I don't know, I haven't picked that back up since that they basically let Gary go. And I don't know. Him and Dead Reckoning held such a special place. I'm just not over it enough to like want to continue, I guess.
Yeah. That makes
So
sense.
yeah, I want to do something else, something horrific. We still with artwork and story, something with horror. But I mean, I don't know. I'll eventually return to the project. It's still a passion project, but it was meant for Gary. It was meant for them, and I don't know. It it's one of those it's one of those what ifs.
Yeah,
Will it get made? Maybe, but I mean, it was just meant for them, and I
yeah.
can't think of anybody else it would go to. So, but yeah, c'est la vie.
Ah, France.
I
Uh,
know. Hercule Poirot.
oh yeah. Well, he's Belgian, man. You gotta get that
And that's
right.
right, he is Belgian, but everyone keeps saying he's a Frenchman.
Yeah, well, yeah, because at that time period, Belgium wasn't occupied by Germany anymore, and so the French basically kind of took that back over, even though it's its own separate country. But yeah, if you ever don't go to Belgium and call them Frenchmen, they get
Yeah,
really, really, really pissed off by it.
well, I'm sure they do, and I mean, but it's really funny because I'm actually listening to one of the Hercule Poirot books for on Audible, and I can't remember which one it is, but it's like they call him a Frenchman
Yeah,
in there, and I'm like, obviously he's not French, but every time I think of him now, it's like the peculiar Frenchman with the fancy mustache. So like it's like, oh, and he's Belgium.
yeah.
So
Uh, so, what would you consider to be your favorite genre to do comics?
probably horror.
I had a feeling you were about to say that, so it's just kind of a loaded question.
Yeah. I mean, probably horror. I mean, I do enjoy superhero stuff. I'm not saying that like I don't have a plethora of ideas for superhero stories because I do, but at the same time, I really want to, I don't know, just do horror. Like I enjoy Stephen King. I mean, I enjoy The Silver Coin is a wonderful horror comic that's been coming out, and even like the Lonesome Hunters that came out from Dark Horse. I enjoy Hellboy. Um,
The whole Mignola verse is
oh, it's
just
so it's so wonderful, man.
yeah.
It's
So I'm
so
actually
beautiful.
halfway through volume one of the Baltimore Omnibus.
Oh yeah, I remember you sent me a
Yeah,
picture about it that you had it. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
yeah,
It's a good run.
it really is. So what's interesting is that before you actually start reading it, there's it's either like a page or a two-page blurb, and it's from Mignola talking about his whole collaborating with Christopher Golden, trying to bring about Baltimore. And he was saying that this first, couple of runs of that comic is his personal favorite because it kind of brings about, well, from one, you really don't have a lot of comics that are basing themselves during World War One. Two,
Yeah,
you really don't see any horror comics basing themselves in World War One. And three, Mignola being Mignola, he kind of has to put his own slant to stuff. And so when you were talking about with you and Ryan about saying you feel like you're more like Kirby and Ryan's more like Lee, uh, Mignola kind of had the same thing going on with Golden because it was just like one of them basically had the idea, but just weren't really knowing. I think it was Mignola. He had the idea. He just really didn't know how about to flesh this thing out into like a full run. And Golden was just like, hold my beer.
yeah,
And basically was just able to make it work. And so uh, my first experience with Baltimore was actually reading the the first trade, which was the plague ships. And so I've read that, so I've knew about that, and that's how I knew about Baltimore. But so far, I've reread the plague ships, the curse spells, the widow and the tank, and right now I can't remember the title of the next story arc, but it's, as far as I know, it's 1917. It's the end of January in Germany. So, uh, So that's where I have my bookmark placed in. But I think Golden did a really good job of having his art style give off the same kind of thing that Mignola is most known for with Hellboy, just the super stark, flat black. Everything's kind of half in shadow, half not. The flat colors, just the trademarks for anything that he does for any sort of
Oh yeah.
Dark Horse stuff. I actually ran across a Wolverine one shot that he did. So I picked that up. It was like $3.
I mean, hey, that's not bad, and
No,
it's so weird to like go and look at his early work, and Mongol is there, but he hasn't found. He's finding his voice, I guess is what I should say. He's finding his swan song that he's going to play for us all when he gets the style right.
yeah,
And it's just like the minute it works, it works. Because I've got a collection over there on my bookshelf of like DC work that he had done. And unless he's doing Batman, it doesn't look right,
yeah,
because it's too dark. But the minute, man, he figured all that stuff out, I mean, it works. Like he even did like the Phantom Stranger for a
that's
while.
right.
Yeah, and if you look at that, it's the beginning of where he gets in Phantom to where he gets with Batman. So it's just really interesting to see like the progression go, because like even when you look at Stretcher Bears, when I started Stretcher Bears out, I hated everything that I did, and I was so worried because by the middle of the book, the style had started to change.
Mhm.
If you look at it, there's certain stylistic pieces that change throughout the book, and I look back at it now, and I'm very proud of the book because I'm like, I started out doing something that not a lot of people get to do. I was able to do it, but I grew from doing that. So now what I try to do is I try to look at my artwork through the eye of I'm growing every time that I draw. Like at night now, I've tried to make it a point. I've tried to do this for several years and I haven't been really good at it. Like I draw every day, but at night when me and my wife sit down and we like watch TV, I have a sketchbook in my lap and I'm drawing. I'm constantly drawing. I'm trying to put the hours in, even if it's only for 1 hour in the evening. I can look at that sketchbook. I fill up a whole page. It could be hands, feet. It could be buildings, whatever I want to draw that night, I'll draw. And I can see how better I'm getting. And I think that's what we need as an artist to like always evolve, always be working to never stagnate. Because the minute we stagnate, that we, I don't know, we can kind of get overblown with our own pompousness, I guess.
Yeah,
And like, I don't know. I always want to have my artwork evolve, I guess, until I die. So, or get to a point where I'm happy with it. So, and I'm my own worst critic. So
yeah,
I'm always going to be like, oh, well, this could obviously be better. Like what I'm drawing now could obviously be better. But like the thing is, I have to live with it. And then I'll get up tomorrow morning and I'll draw again. So,
yeah. So there was a point, I guess, whenever I was trying to do a stylistic change. This happened around, I want to say it started sometime in 2019, going into 2020, because my art style previously was actually very much focused on a lot of, uh, it was just very much influenced by Kentaro Miura, Otomo, Shiro Masamune, uh, obviously Ikigami, and a few other like old school guys who are just like, you know, beautiful work that could tell stories, through their art. And more times than not, they were also the writer of whatever
Right.
series that they were doing. Um, of course, now it's just like you have to have it, the whole uh, piecing together now with at least with manga is that even if you do have someone that is both writer and artist, they usually end up having like two assistants with them to do the finer details before it gets put into print.
Right.
Um,
I mean, gee whiz, the guy that did Berserk, like he had what, 20,
well,
21
before
assistants?
before he even had assistants, I mean, he was doing everything himself, which even back then was both nuts and impressive at the same time with the level of
Oh yeah.
detail. But the crazy part is that like it wasn't until maybe uh, I think 10 years ago when he actually started to convert doing everything traditional to digital.
Oh, I
So
didn't realize he switched over.
yeah, I didn't realize that either, but apparently he did switch over, and it took him a while to figure out, customizing the pins and
Oh yeah.
the different stuff to make it feel like he's, doing it like he is traditionally. Um, but yeah, I didn't realize until that had happened. And I was just like, well, it kind of makes sense. But even then, you can see an evolution from when he started in 1989 all the way up until when he recently passed. Um, but it, and of course, there was also the artist for all of the Capcom stuff too. So Bingus, Akimen, a few others. Um, but there was a point in about 2019 where I realized I can't keep doing this because I'm going to stagnate, and I don't want to get roped into the same category of people that are still doing it. Yeah, they got success, but the only problem is that they keep promising that they're going to put out a comic and they never do,
Right.
or they end up being a cover artist for Udon, and I didn't want to get stuck in that category. I didn't want to get you know, shuffle underneath the dirt. So I was just like, I have to go back to all the Western stuff. Take everything that I knew before, apply it to more of a Western style, and just have that shift. So yeah, I was going back to the Western comics that kind of looking at certain artists that had blew my mind as a kid, and going forward. So that was looking back at Frank Frazetta, Adam Hughes, Terry Dodson, Frank Cho, uh, Joe Madureira, and a few other guys. And it was just really nice to get back into that because it was just like um, I definitely felt a little bit more alive doing that. And even then, I'm still learning better ways to draw light haired people because that's always been the thing that has tripped me up the most. And I had to take a few notes from looking at Stuart Eminem and how he draws and renders like light colored hair because it's very much like a less is more kind of approach that he does. And I've had to take that little nugget of information and like lodge it in like the deep recesses of my brain, so whenever I have to do any sort of hair rendering, I can pop that out at any moment and do that. But um, the one thing that I don't think is ever going to happen is a person feeling like they're going to make their art hit perfection.
Yeah.
Uh, Partly because the concept of perfection is just a state of mind. But even so, I'm going to use this as a terrible example, but I could do something and then have it in my mind, oh, it's perfect, and then have like some seasoned professional look at it and be like, yeah, so like that part needs to be put back this way, and you know, looking at it and just kind of like dissecting it to, you know, every line that you realize, oh God, it really wasn't perfect in the first place. But I have gotten to a point where whenever I'm doing anything from, you know, like these pieces that I've been doing every day in February to any sort of like sketching out a possible storyboard of something, that I'm happy.
Right.
You know, it did its job. I've gotten it done. I'm happy. Um, if it's for someone else, they're obviously happy and ecstatic about it too, and that works for me. I'm pretty sure I can look back on this piece next week and just be like, "Yep, not perfect," but that doesn't matter because you know, what's done is done, and you know, learn from it, move on. Um, uh, yeah,
And I
just
mean,
zero.
and you're right about that. That sometimes we're our own worst critics with everything, and everyone's gonna always have an opinion about your artwork. You
Yeah.
know, and that was the thing. I mean, I learned a long time ago from art school. I know you learned it too. That like opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one. Everyone's gonna say what they want to say about it, and it kind of is what it is. And
Uh,
because I
I
mean, I'm sure
hate that
you.
quote.
I know, but you've been to shows, man. I've seen like grown men go up to other like professionals and say your artwork sucks. And like, what are you supposed to say? It was like,
Well,
thanks.
hang on. If it's towards Rob Liefeld, he deserves it. There
What
is
I
zero reason why a guy should have a career in the industry and still draw two left feet. There is zero reason for that.
Well, he also can't draw thumbs. But I mean, but the thing is that there's a lot of people out there that really like his artwork, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that like, do I like his version of Captain America with a giant barrel chest and like big man movies? Not really. But like, I mean, he's he's not. I'm not gonna go pick up a Rob Liefeld comic. I hate to say that about Rob. He deserves the credit that he gets in the industry for what he did. He was big at one time. I mean, he's still kind of big because of the Deadpool stuff that's come out. But I mean, I'm not going out of my way to buy Rob Liefeld art. I'm going out of my way to buy, maybe something by Toth or something by, Adam or Joe Kubert. People that I admire and I
Yeah.
like, what they do. Um, I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of comic book artists. I was fortunate enough to meet Erwin Hasen when he was still alive. I met Al Feldstein, who worked on a lot of the old EC books before he passed. I met Jerry Robinson. And just talking to a lot of those guys, I mean, I don't know. Like you could, I mean, I'm sure someone went up to Jerry Robinson and said, like, "Hey, your Joker sucks," but the thing is like, it's just their opinion, and like he created the Joker,
Yeah.
so I'm like, how can you tell that what he does sucks, you know? Because it's just like your opinion, you just don't like it. But but yeah, at least we can all agree on that Rob Liefeld can't draw feet and he can't draw thumbs. So I mean, we can all agree on that.
But he can draw pouches.
He can draw beautiful pouches. But I
And
mean, but in this industry though, you kind of have to do more than just gorgeous pouches,
oh yeah.
especially for the 90s.
Yeah. Um God, what was that joke that I made about John Mishima? Oh, he draws a good horse.
I mean, he does. I mean, you're right about that. You told me like the first time I met you, you were like, "Oh, John Buscemi can draw a really good horse," and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yeah." I was like, you're totally right. But what was that we talked about that he couldn't draw? He really wasn't a good fit for it. Um,
Uh
what was it? Because I cannot remember.
it was something Marvel related. I can't remember if it was the Avengers. Like I know a lot of people like his work in Avengers. I personally liked him more when he was doing Spider-Man. Um but when he was doing Conan, it definitely felt like he was in the place where he needed to be, and you can tell that in the art. It felt a lot more freeing. He had a lot more levity to create versus, the stuff that Ditko and Kirby and whoever else that was working on Spider-Man and Adventures during that time period had already put together. Which I randomly found a video of John Buscema as far as his inking is concerned, and he was talking about doing straight lines. And basically, what he's doing is that, of course, he's doing the straight lines not with a pen; he's doing it with a brush, and puts down a ruler, has that as his like hand rest or something, and then zoop, straight line. Yes, I did say that perfection is a bit of a state of mind, because Jay, how I see it is more of a Webster dictionary kind of definition when it comes to perfection. Simply because what's considered perfect from one person, 10 other people can find the imperfections in it. And if you disagree with that, that's perfectly fine. It's the same thing with what was that word? Independence. Independence is technically a state of being, a state of mind. It's not a skateboard company. It's not a T-shirt. So take that as you will. But getting over back on track, because I kind of took us off rails for a little bit. What do you feel like are your favorite techniques when it comes to drawing?
Man, that's a tough one too. I mean, I really like it when I can take a toothbrush and put like white ink on it or white paint and like splatter it and make it messy. I mean, I know that sounds really kind of odd to say, but like to me, it adds something to it because it's so natural. It's like a
Yeah.
natural movement because like sometimes in drawing, like what you mentioned with John Buscema and like what he was doing, like with a ruler, or like to me, it's like sometimes it's not natural to like use a ruler when I'm doing, or like I'll try to sketch something out with a pen, and of course that looks awful. But the thing is that I'd rather have a natural line than a machine line. And the ruler can become a tool, a great tool, but it can also become a hindrance because
Yeah.
you can get stuck to it. And then your artwork looks like a machine did it. And I don't want that. I want it to look like a human hand took time and, you know, turn that piece out. And because that's just like the artwork that I personally like. Um, even though a lot of the artwork that I like is very simple. Like if you look at a lot of like Toth's work, it's like most of it was like looks like marker because it was. But like I like it. It's simple. And Chris Somney, he's been able to, or Samney, however you pronounce his name,
Yeah.
he's been able to follow really what Toth did, and he's able to add simplicity to it. I've tried it. Do I accomplish it that great? No, but I mean, I get close.
Uh,
And
there's an artist. Of course, he passed away probably about 2 years ago.
you're talking about Darwin Cook?
Well, I was just going to say Jean Paul Leon.
Yeah, that's true.
Like him and Samney were basically in that range of like, I want to call it Tothisms. Because they kind of do that thing where they play around with negative space. It looks like they're just drawing with markers, and technically, yeah. Um, but Samney's Bat-tobers,
They're gorgeous.
they are gorgeous. It's the thing that I look forward to every October now. Um, yeah.
I mean, I'm right there with you on it. Like, I check it out every day, like what he's doing. I'll send it to my wife, send it to my brother. I mean, because like it's impressive what he's able to do. But if you look at what he's doing, he's really mapping it out
Mm,
so that like he has an idea. He's already got the shading down. He'll do some type of like test to make sure that this is how I want the shading to look. This is what I want it to be. So like a lot of thought goes into a piece that maybe looks like it took him 5 minutes, 10 minutes to do, but maybe he spent an hour on it to try
yeah.
to figure out how to do it correctly and how to make it look right. So I think that's the great thing about him is that at least he's able to take the time to figure out, okay, what's gonna make this look the best? What's gonna make this pop? What color could I use? And I really love it to see like when colorists will take what Chris has done and basically like just add color to it because it adds so much of a like another layer on top of his artwork.
So now we're about to get honest again. What is your least favorite thing to draw?
Probably caricatures. And we talked a little bit about that before the stream came on. It's like I don't
Yeah.
like. I mean, likenesses of people. It's so tough to do, and I don't mind doing it. I would just rather do it at home. I don't want to do it at a convention. Um, Preferably to make sure that I've got a lot of I don't know, just enough time to make it where if you look at that picture, someone's gonna be able to say, "Hey, that's Reed," or "Hey, this is Thomas," or "This is Theodore Roosevelt." I don't want to look at it and be like, I have to tell you what it is, for a likeness. So, I don't know. I really like an artist by the name. His name was Herbert Block, and he worked for the Washington Post. They called his pen name was Her Block, and he did a lot of political cartoons. He would attack Republicans just like Democrats. I don't really care about the politics, but I like how he was able to capture the presidents that we had, especially like Nixon and Jimmy Carter and Eisenhower and even Bill Clinton and Bush. Um, he was alive through such a period of time in America that like he captured like so much of his political cartoons that I just really love his style because it's simple, but I know who that is. You don't even have to put any words with it. And I realize, hey, that's Richard Nixon. Hey, that's Ronald Reagan. You
Mm.
know, so I really, if I could get to that point, I would be incredibly happy with with that. If I could ever get like how he was able to do it. And gosh, there was a really good documentary that came out that HBO did. Jon Stewart was part of the production team on it, and it was called Her Block, the Black and the White, and they had an actor that basically like played Her Block, and they went through his whole life and talked about everything, showed the comics that he had done, and I mean, it's just gorgeous, gorgeous artwork that was up there. And I've got a couple of his books that collect a lot of his artwork, so I can like just whenever I want, like if ever I need an idea or trying to figure out how to draw something that I would want it to look like stylized in a simplistic way, I'll look at his stuff, kind of like Toth. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Answers the question.
Um, I think the least favorite thing for me, which is really weird because as a kid, I loved drawing them, but now it feels like I'm pulling teeth whenever I draw robots.
Hmm.
And I think some of it just has to do with the fact of like, when you're a little kid, you've got this, whole I don't care, it looks cool, kind of mentality, just go to town, and you're really not thinking about anatomy, perspective, or any of that sort of stuff.
Right.
But I think, well, I know for a fact that me being a kid and being one of probably about maybe 3 or 4 people in my graduating class who were actually doing any sort of artwork whatsoever, that I actually was putting, the effort and the forethought into, like, drawing stuff, making sure that I felt like the characters were correct and all that sort of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
it was just like, I didn't even need to do like an under sketch. I didn't have to, pencil it out. It was just like printer paper, ballpoint pen, let's go. And here's the Gundam. Now it's just like, no, I've got to, get several different rulers out, because that happened during when I was trying to do Optimus Prime last month. It's just having to measure everything out and double checking to make sure that I didn't feel like this side was more lopsided than the other and all this sort of stuff. And what's also kind of interesting is that from looking back at Transformer art, you go from like the OG stuff from like generation 1 and 2,
Right.
and how simplistic it looked, and then you get over to the stuff from like Dreamwave into IDW, and like the level of artistry that they brought to making these characters look like the behemoths that they are, like even down to like giving them like bullet holes and rust and cracked windows and all this sort of stuff. And it's just like, I can't compete with that. It does get a little intimidating, but there's one artist who did a lot of stuff for Transformers. His name is Alex Milne.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, he's been having some health problems within like the last couple of months.
Sucks.
Yeah, I think it was like he had surgery, and I think what should have corrected something in the surgery ended up creating another problem. So, it's one of those weird kind of situations that happen. Uh, but yeah, so just seeing the stuff that he posts, it's just like, yeah, here's the sketch that I did today. And it's this fully detailed cover for a Transformers issue that would be coming out within the next month or something like that. I'm just like, you call this a sketch?
Yeah.
Um,
So it's kind of like what is he calling his completed work if that's a sketch?
oh, if it's completed work, it's like fully colored, the whole 9 yards that he does, which that's also been something that's really kind of well, for some people it might actually be true. With others, it's not true. But it's just like, oh yeah, here's my warm up sketch, and it's something that's like almost fully rendered through Photoshop and all this sort of stuff. And you got people in the comments like, that's a warm up sketch.
Yeah.
What does your completed work look like?
Well,
Uh,
and that's the funny thing about, you know, like artists, like we don't, whatever we post online, and that's all of us, we never really see what went on behind closed doors to get there. And that's like, I'm terrible about posting on social media. My wife gets on me about it a lot because um it's just like I'm working every day, but that doesn't mean I can show you exactly what I'm working on like every day, because it could be a bit of a project that I can't show, or um I just don't want to show it yet. You know, that's the biggest thing with like social media and stuff, because like whatever drives the algorithm, and like it's difficult
mm.
because you never know as the artist like what went on for them to get that certain piece or whatever done. basically.
So it's interesting because like I feel like the way around getting out of the sticky situation of like I can't post because I signed an NDA or whatever um, about whatever project that you're working on, and I'm starting to see that like the way out with certain projects, and I think it really depends on the company you're working for
Right.
and the editor in charge and all that sort of stuff. But I have seen several people. It's just like the only thing that they can post about it is yes, I am on X title and I'm working with this writer or this inker or whatever. But they'll have like the only thing that you see is like a super zoomed in like piece of a background or uh, that you probably won't even recognize when you finally get the issue or
Hmm.
the very top part of the paper where you write down the title and the name and all that sort of stuff, and that's all you see. Um,
Yeah, I think Greg Capullo did that not too
oh,
long
he
ago.
does that all the time.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter what it is that he's working on; he does it all the time, and it's funnier whenever he does his old man voice, uh, because it absolutely cracks me up. Which there was someone I was talking to. It was last year, and it's just like, man, I want to talk to Greg Capullo, but he looks like the most intimidating person in the face of the planet. I'm like, the dude's a teddy bear.
he's very nice.
He loves his fans. He loves talking to people. He loves life. You're not going to have any issues. It's just he just happens to have like a mean mug. That's it.
I mean, he definitely gives off a big intimidating vibe, but like he's one of the nicest people when you go up there and you talk to him. I've met him and I've met uh, Scott Schneider too. Um, and I actually walked them to one of their panels that they were doing at Boston Comic Con years ago. Um, I'm sure they don't remember who I am, but I definitely remember who they are.
Yeah.
So that was always really cool, and they were very friendly and down to earth. And I think that's the big thing about. I mean, I used to be starstruck a lot of the time. I mean, going to shows and stuff because like these are like, I mean, people that draw like Spider Man. I mean, they're like rock stars essentially. And then like you tell them that, and then they laugh, and they're like, "Well, I'm just human, kid," you know. And it's kind of like the same way, I guess, for fans of my work. They come up to me, and then they talk to me about stretcher bears and everything. And I guess with it that whenever someone comes up to me and talks to me about the work, I want to make them feel like that they're the most important person in the room at the time when I'm talking to them, because they are, because they're a fan and they're expressing like how much they love what I was able to do. And if it made them feel something, that's so wonderful that they've been able to feel something. And let alone that they took 5 minutes out of their day to read a comic. There's not a lot of people that'll do that. I mean, newspaper sales, magazine sales, I mean, comic sales. I mean, the graphic novel sales are through the roof, but monthly issue books sales are down. But I mean, besides a phone holding your attention, it's amazing that comics are still around, that it can hold somebody's attention, and
Yeah.
that they're gonna want to like, oh man, I really want to read this comic and figure out what happened, what's gonna happen to these guys and stuff. So it's always nice when that happens. And I feel like I got us off subject for whatever
No,
we
I
were
mean
talking
it
about.
definitely makes sense. You definitely want to take the time to talk to your fans, and especially if someone has gone out of state to see you
Yeah.
and buy your stuff. I mean, you definitely should be hella grateful about that and not have an ego about it. Um, which speaking of guys like Snyder and Capullo. Apparently, Tom King was at Baltimore, and I didn't realize that.
He was?
It sounded
I
like
didn't realize that he was.
supposedly he was. He may have just like stopped in to talk to a couple of the DC people because Lee and Miller were there for Saturday, and then of course that DC editor was there doing the portfolio reviews.
Right.
So I'm wondering if he had just stopped by the one day or if he was there all 3 days. I don't remember, but apparently he was there. Which I mean, he lives in DC, so
Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, that wouldn't have been too far of a trip for him
no,
to like come into Baltimore and like see. Yeah, well, because Garth Ennis was there for like what, one day too, I think.
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I do hate that I didn't get a chance to talk to Brian Stelfreeze and Jim Cheung. Um, but just the crowds. I mean, it
yeah,
was
it was.
great, but there was just a lot of people to wade through, and especially Saturday.
Oh man, yeah, Saturday was bad.
I I think the thing that like really kind of going back to just talking to people who've taken the time to read your stuff, buy your stuff, come out to see you at a convention. Um, and of course, this happens once or twice. Anytime that I've happened to have a table set up, there'll be someone that I know that I haven't seen a lot come out to see me, and then someone who I've seen all the time come in at the same time. So it's just like I want to have a conversation with both of these people,
Yeah.
but you can get away with it with your twin brother. I can't.
Well, you're right, and that's the tough thing too about going to shows is that unless I have somebody with me, I can't really get up and talk to people
Yeah,
because essentially, like I'm chained to the table until the show's over, and then by the time the show's over, everyone's trying to rush out the door, get to the hotel, try to get something to eat. I mean, it's late, everyone's tired. So, I mean, yeah, it's a constant struggle. But you're right. I luck up a lot that I have the ability that I have a twin brother that he can wait at the table and he can be there.
and pretend to be you.
Well, yeah, I mean, he could pretend to be me, or I could pretend to be him. I mean, that's the whole thing too. But I mean, not that we do that. So, but but
No, I'm
yeah,
Spartacus. No, I'm Spartacus.
exactly. Everyone's Spartacus. But I mean, it used to be when because me and Ryan went to the same college, and yeah, he's done that. But it was really funny because like I was always in the art building at ECU, and like he would be going from his classes from the anthropology department in the opposite direction, and people would be like, "Hi, Reed," and then like they'll wave, and he'll wave back, not say anything, and then they'll come in the classroom, and they're like, "I just saw you get on the bus, and I waved at you." I was like, "How are you here?" And I was like, "You saw my twin brother," and I used to freak people out like all the time, like on campus. And it finally got to the point I was like, just say hey to him and talk to him and see if what he says. And a lot of times they'll be like, "Hey Reed," and he'll just say hey back, and then that's kind of it. So I mean, there's upsides to having it. You confuse a lot of people.
Right.
I mean, yeah, that was always funny. So having a twin
Apparently,
is nice.
apparently, I have a doppelganger somewhere in the North Alabama area. I've been told this for like the last 20 years. That someone has seen
Hmm.
me at some place or whatever, and I'm like, nope.
Are you sure it's not you though?
uh, you know what? I'm just going to pull a Jet Li and be like, there's only no, sorry, that's Highlander. There could be only one. Well, I mean, Jet Li's the one kind of had a whole Highlander kind of thing about it, but
Well, he did
uh,
do the movie Hero, and that was really good.
yeah. So what is or what are your personal comic goals for 2023?
Um, well, I guess we can go ahead and announce it here. I mean, me and you were collaborating on something, so hopefully, yeah, hopefully hopefully that will gain ground and
Yeah.
take off. So we're working on that. I mean, I don't know. The biggest thing is this year is like just I don't know, man. Just do more work, I guess. Like I'm working on a pitch, one with you, one with with something else that I'm working on, and so yeah, definitely
It,
spoiler alert.
it's a
But
spoiler alert. He jinxed it.
yeah, Thomas
Flip
is gonna
table.
quit tomorrow, guys. He's gonna throw in the towel. He's gonna be like, "F you, Reed." He's like, "You spoiled everything."
I'm gonna throw in my beard. Ugh.
I'm not gonna throw in mine. My wife would leave me if I shaved my beard off. So it's the baby face, man. The baby face. So, but I guess is the main thing this year is just like do more work. Like try to get published more because like the industry is like so it seems like it's so in turmoil right now.
Mhm.
Like with everything going over, the high turnover rate, everything getting cut, people dying left and right. But I mean, there's always something new. I mean, there's um new outlets that you can like try to publish books through.
Yeah.
So what like Zoop was one of them, and there's another web comic that's going to probably replace Comixology since now they've been absorbed into Amazon. And I can't remember the name of it, but the Beat just released an article detailing that, and it's supposed to the beta's out now, and they're supposed to be coming out with it. So, I mean, that's another platform to push comics through. But to me, I really I want to get it physically in the hand to somebody because to me, I
There's also
can't.
Substack.
Yeah, with Substack too, but they want like bigger creators with bigger following.
Yeah.
And like I'm just Reid Beaman. I'm not Chip Zdarsky. I'm not Scotty Young. I'm not, you know, Ed Brubaker, anything like that. I mean, could I eventually be like them? Sure. Could I not? Sure. But like, I mean, you cannot. I mean, always shoot for the stars. Hopefully, you'll land again in them, or at least hit the moon or something. So,
Next state
I
over.
mean, yeah, I mean, really, but it's all we can do. I mean, this industry, it's such a vast industry,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter. I mean, dude, like, I mean, you could work on a comic with me, but you could literally have the next kid's book, or not kids book, I should say, but kids comic in your head.
Mm.
Like, there's uh an Eisner Award winning book I have over there on my shelf called Smile. It's by Scholastic, and it won an Eisner, and it's one of the most popular comics
I
that's been
remember that
sold. Yeah,
because because that came out during 2020, right?
it did. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
one of the big
because
ones
there
in
was like a whole
2020.
series of or if it wasn't by the same people, it was definitely done by Scholastic because I remember seeing about like 5 or 6 of them. They were probably aside from Wings of Fire, they were probably the most requested kids book uh, for Books a Million. And it makes sense. The hardest thing was like having to deal with parents be like, we didn't come to a bookstore to buy you a comic book. And I'm just like, ma'am, it's a graphic novel.
Yeah, and but see
Emphasis on novel.
that's the thing about how comics have changed, and because I was an art teacher for 3 years, and one of my favorite people to talk to was the librarian
Yeah.
because I would ask her, "What's your most popular book that's coming out here?" And she said graphic novels, and I like fell over. I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "50% of the books that I buy now for this library, it was kindergarten through 8th grade. The majority of the books that were going out the door the fastest were the graphic novels."
Mm.
And Scholastic has stumbled onto that, and so is Viz Media. And they, do like Shonen Jump, they do My Hero Academia, they do Naruto. I mean, it's not just Marvel and DC.
Yeah.
It's the big two are Scholastic and Viz Media. And because thinking about it, man, like Marvel's trying to get on the bandwagon with that now, and so is DC about being the Scholastic Book Fair. But even you were a kid, you went to public school, you know what a Scholastic Book Fair is. I know what a Scholastic Book Fair is. It's so much accessibility for kids to get it, or they go to the library at school or the public library. I mean, they may not have the money to buy it, but you could go to any library in America
Yeah.
and you can check out a book for free.
Yeah.
And you can take it home, read it for how many days you want it, and then return it. So, I mean, there's nothing better really that you could have that for a graphic novel. Because, I mean, think about how many libraries there are in America, you know, and let alone the world. Because if you get with Scholastic or with Viz Media, you're also getting a world, I would say, a world company that's going to be, it's going to translate in totally different languages. And it may take some time, it may take a year, 2 years, but it'll get out there, and everyone eventually will have read it.
Yeah.
So that's the great thing about what we have now is that you know we have the ability that if you want to do a kids comic, do a kids comic. It's the sky's the limit. It's just whatever you can kind of like produce and think of.
Yeah, Scholastic has definitely grown from Goosebumps and I Spy books to where it is right now,
Oh yeah,
which I would still buy an I Spy book or Where's Waldo. Just
yeah.
personally. Um, so, as far as just like your current reading, old new stuff,
Well,
what hit
what
your
I
face?
like, do you want to know like what I like? What's in my pull stack now?
Yeah,
The new Chip Zdarsky Batman. I've been enjoying that. Um, I also get Croca. I think it's pronounced Croca from Image Comics. Like
yeah,
issue 3 just dropped. It's I love weird indie books, and it looked like giant alligators with that, and I was like, I want to read that book about that giant alligator monster and like what's going on in this weird, crazy world. So I'll read that. I'll pick up like Hellboy because I like Hellboy. I read like Hellboy in Love. I really have read like a lot of like Lonesome Hunters from Dark Horse. Really, Batman's been one of the only superhero books that I've been getting. Besides, like I'll get like some older books. Like I read Batman Arkham Living Hell that Dan Slott wrote like years
okay,
ago.
yeah,
So I read that. I read Batman Gotham Streets. I I got like my mom got me got Gotham Central, the omnibus, which is oh my god, it's amazing.
mm,
I love that book. Like it's such good writing, like with Ed Brubaker and just gorgeous artwork in it, and I love it to death. Um, so I don't know, like I pick like random. I don't know. My mind it's like a ping pong ball. It constantly like bangs around and like whatever I see or someone talks about like on the internet or a recommendation, I'll try to find it and like pick it up. And but normally I have to like the artist. Like sometimes I'll just buy it for the art, and it's just like not even for the story. But anything that Daniel Warren Johnson's done, I recently read Murder Falcon. That was something I hadn't read. I enjoyed that. Um,
did it did it pull out your heart?
I mean, honestly, what pulled in my heart the most was Do a Power Bomb.
So I haven't finished reading. I've got all the issues. I just haven't finished reading the last two issues of it. Uh, Definitely off the beam path of comics that I would read,
Oh
but
yeah,
it was Johnson. Just like he hasn't done me wrong, so I definitely took a chance on that one. So far, it's been a good reward for sure. Uh, so far, Murder Falcon and uh, Wonder Woman Dead Earth has been probably my two favorite ones that he's done. Extremity's good. It's a good introduction to stuff that he's done. I haven't read the Ghost Fleet yet.
I
Um,
haven't read that one either.
I know it's got some mixed reviews, and even he admits that, like, it was definitely the book that kind of got him in the door with Image Skybound, partly because he was working with Donny Cates. But apparently there's I don't want to call it a director's cut, but it's like some sort of like special edition thing for it that they recently dropped it, and I might pick it up. Of course, Adventure Man has been my constant thing for the last 2 years with reading. Gotta support Terry Dodson.
Yes.
And of course, I mean it's one of the few comics that I would consider as pulp adventure. Unless you see someone trying to bring in like the Shadow, the Phantom, or anything like that, it's the closest thing that I've got. That is that. It's I don't know if it's completely confirmed or not in terms of when they're going to be doing the third round of Adventure Men, but I'm both holding my breath and not holding my breath at the same time. He recently just did panels for Spider-Man issue 19. Kylie is asking, is that a man trapped in an ice cream cone?
Yeah, it's MODOK, but basically he's like trapped in an ice cream cone.
So I was wondering about that because it looked like you were drawing MODOK. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
cool, MODOK, and just kept on asking questions and listening, and then he started drawing an ice cream cone. I'm like, oh,
I kind of like went Ryan Otley with it when he does like the sketches and stuff. Like
oh
they're,
yeah,
they're like
yeah.
really random, and I was like, I didn't like how I did like the arms and the legs with it, and I didn't want to like fight it to what I was doing. So it was like he always looks like he's like a part of an ice cream cone, kind of. MODOK does, at least in my brain, he does. So like, I was like, well, we'll just add it to it. But yeah, he's trapped in the ice cream cone. So yeah. So
Let's
that's
see
a
what
plug for
else.
everyone. Go watch Ant-Man and Wasp: Quantumania
um,
because
let's see.
I'm sure MODOK's going to be wonderful in that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I do want to watch it. I'm kind of interested to see what they do. Appreciate it, T.
Um, let's see. Uh, so I've read the first two issues of Gotham City Year One.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Tom King mystery that he's doing. So far, I've enjoyed it. I just need to catch up. Issue 5 just dropped. That's in my box. I think I mean, there's a couple of things here and there that I picked up. Death Dealer, uh, the Frank Frazetta comic. That's been fun. Definitely not for little kids, but it's definitely been fun to read that. It really didn't have much of a reason for me to get any of the other stuff that they're trying to do, like Dawn Attack, and I think there's like another one that they're trying to put out. Which is cool that they're doing comics based on famous paintings that he has done in his career. But just out of all of them, Death Dealer is the only one that has multiple paintings of the same figure.
Right. Well, they're on the phone.
Yep. But let's see. I was talking about this with you earlier, but some of the stuff that I've just been trying to find has just been like stuff that people obviously aren't talking about right now, or they've never read it before, and so I still have to tell them just like, hey, this thing does exist. If you like this, you'll probably like this. Or the reason we got to here is because of this. Oh, you haven't read it? Well, here you go.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been staggering finding out the amount of people who haven't read a lot of stuff from the Ultimates era of Marvel.
Yeah.
Which some of it, some of the reasons I do understand. Some of it was just like way too young at the time, or they weren't reading comics at that point and didn't start collecting comics until the MCU started getting the ball rolling about 10, 11 years ago. So, that's totally understandable. But people that are our age that hadn't even read the Ultimates, but they have read, the current storyline of, Amazing Spider-Man since the 90s or X-Men since the 90s or whatever. And
Right.
it's just like, you never read the Ultimates. It's one of those things. There was a lot of good. There was definitely some bad, definitely some weird with some of the choices that they did. But, if it wasn't for that first two big storylines of the Ultimate Avengers line, we wouldn't have the Avengers film.
Oh, not at all. No.
Yeah, I mean, technically, yes, we could have, but there was so much that they pulled as reference from that to make that a thing.
Well, I mean,
So,
even like having Samuel L. Jackson be Nick Fury as he was drawn in Ultimates, and even dare to make him a black man
mm,
in comics, like that was. I mean, I remember that being a big deal
yeah,
when it happened in the Ultimates, and like I think it was perfect. I think it was perfect choice, perfect casting, and I mean, thank God that we were able to see it come to fruition in a
yeah.
film.
And now Secret Invasion is about to drop within
Yeah,
the year, so that's going to be
yeah. I'm
as far
still,
as like the Marvel stuff is concerned. Ant-Man, definitely. Yeah. I
yeah,
want to see Kang. I want to see what's going to go down. Definitely interested in Secret Invasion, but um, as weird as it sounds, I'm actually not going to watch the second Into the Spider-Verse film.
oh really?
Yeah. So they had dropped a 2-minute trailer for it a couple months back, and I was sitting down and watching. I'm just like, oh, this is going to be great. It starts off cool. I mean, Gwen is basically bringing Miles into the Spider Verse, and you get to see almost all of the Spider Man variations possible in the multiverse.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of it being, hey, we're all collectively getting together to go against something that's threatening the Spider Verse, to we're just going to create civil war and have a whole infighting situation. So now it's just, well, we just fan serviced all of these characters in this trailer, and it's now the butting of heads between 2099 versus Miles, showdown kind of thing. And the last couple of Marvel stuff has been infighting.
Yeah,
And after a couple of years of that, it does get a little stale. So I'm just kind of pushing that off on the side. Maybe at some point in the future, I'll sit and watch it after it's already been released. But it's probably not one that I'm going to go see in the theaters. As far as just the whole DC stuff, until I definitely want to see Blue Beetle for sure. I wasn't really impressed by the Shazam trailer, which I had a lot of high hopes for.
yeah.
Because the first one was really good.
It was good. It was fun.
Yeah, it was a fun film, and it was basically what I feel like reading as far as like current Shazam stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm definitely a little more excited to watch Blue Beetle. I definitely want to see that happen. I'm probably going to skip out on Flash and Aquaman 2. I'm sorry if that hurts anyone's feelings out there just watching it. If you want to watch it, that's fine. I'm not going to stop you. But I am super duper 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 excited that we're getting the Authority. Because the fact that we're getting a Image Comics, Wildstorm Comics into the silver screen, that's something I didn't see coming at all. And
I
here
mean,
it
I didn't
is.
expect Creature Commandos, and I'm like really excited about that. And like, I'm like, this looks awesome, and
Yeah,
I'm really hopeful for the Swamp Thing movie that they can use the same guys that were on like the TV show for Swamp Thing because
Yeah.
it was perfect. It's just they lost all that money, doing it, and that was on the producers or whoever.
Mm.
So, and
Well,
North Carolina too for the film industry.
yeah, well, if I remember correctly, with the CW and what they were trying to put out, Stargirl was doing really well.
Yeah,
Supergirl was up down. Flash is now finally ending. Arrowverse did its thing. Um, but apparently with the Swamp Thing, for some reason it was just like they were in the right direction. They were making it into a horror show, which it technically is,
yeah,
and it was almost like they were just pushing the edge in terms of where they could take it within a TV 14 rating, and they moved it from CW to just streaming, and then it just fell
yeah.
flat.
Well, part of the reason why it fell flat in streaming was the fact that at the time it was being filmed around Wilmington, North Carolina, and I'm very familiar with the film industry. Well, I guess I shouldn't say very, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah,
And North Carolina at one time had a tax break, a very significant tax break. And what ended up happening is that I think the production lost like $2 million in like tax revenue or like a tax break they would get. And basically it caused the production to go like really, really expensive. And they kind of like blew the budget up.
right,
And because of that, it kind of like destroyed the ability for them to even like function economically in Wilmington. And I mean, there's been so many films shot down in Wilmington. I mean, it's famous for Dawson's Creek, but like The Crow was shot there. Part of the Ninja Turtles was shot there. So
hmm,
like they had a film industry there at one time, but I mean it's just dead now because of just dumb stuff that goes on in the North Carolina legislature.
right.
But I mean, I don't live in that. I don't live in North Carolina anymore. I live in South Carolina. So I mean, I can talk crap about my own state where I was born.
Yeah, I haven't been to the Wilmington area, and it's probably since about maybe 2007.
It's still the same.
Yeah, I figured as
You're
much.
not missing nothing.
Thanks for that, Reed.
I mean, growth comes very slow.
Yeah,
So
I do
you're a
think it's
southerner,
interesting.
you know what I'm talking about. Growth is slow here.
Yeah, I do
So
think it's interesting that the hot film spot is Atlanta, Georgia, of all
well,
places.
it makes sense though. To me, it does.
It is. I mean, there's because it has so many like outlying cities that do connect into
Yeah.
the greater Atlanta. Well, sorry, greater is a bit of a misnomer, but it's just the whole Atlanta area with just having like Snellville and Auburn and all that stuff like verging right into it. It makes sense because that's like a whole lot of real estate that you can use as far as
Oh
like
yeah.
filming is concerned, which is pretty awesome for the most part. I just for some reason I just never really think about Atlanta being the hotspot place for the film industry now. I think some of it just has to be with the fact of like I'm so used to films being made over on the West Coast,
Right.
up in New York, Vancouver, or Ontario.
Yeah.
In one of those two places in Canada, or obviously overseas. I mean that's really all that I see regarding it. So like seeing films being done in states that aren't those that don't host those particular cities is really interesting.
Well, I think a lot of, like you said, it has to do with the location of it, where it's at. Atlanta's a major airline hub. Also the tax break that they get for filming that's
Yeah,
there in Georgia. And not to mention that, but I mean, a lot of companies are there. Like Titmouse is there.
Tyler
Cartoon
Perry.
Network, yeah, Tyler Perry's there. Cartoon Network is there because of Adult Swim being there
Mm,
in Atlanta. I mean, gosh, SCAD is there. So like, I mean, a lot of the kids for like SCAD, I mean, there's a lot of talented kids that come out of SCAD every year.
Yeah.
So I mean, at least the good thing is there's an industry that they can go into, and you don't have to go all the way out to California or New York and like pay out the wazoo. Even though now you kind of are paying out the wazoo because Atlanta's getting pretty pricey too. I think
Yeah.
that's everywhere. I mean, even here in South Carolina, we're still seeing like homes going for significantly more than what they were bought at, back around like pre-pandemic. But we're
Yeah.
all in a housing crisis now. So, I mean, not to get political here on the show, but like,
It's just,
yeah,
it's one crisis after another. Life is a DC comic.
yeah,
We're entering the next crisis.
yeah. But did we really have to be on like the dumb part of the DCU? Like the one that like, I get tired of that. Like, I feel like we're really living in a really dumb timeline. And I know I hate to say that, but I'm like, come on, man. I was like, we can at least do better, at
Yeah.
least. I mean, I don't know. Some days it's kind of like I'm just waiting for Galactus to show up. Just waiting, just waiting, because like they keep saying like the military shut down all these like weather balloons or God knows what they are, the size of a car, and I'm like, if that's aliens or like if it's China, I mean, we got a bad problem.
So I forgot who it was. Someone, politician wise, I want to say it was like a mayor or governor, was just like, so while the U.S. is shooting down, these spy balloons, we just shot down our first UFO. Go Canada. So it's
Yeah,
just like, what? This is not on my 2023 bingo card.
I know. Like it's not something we like would have predicted, or also like because like The Last of Us has gotten popular, that they released the article about, oh, there's a deadly fungus that's like now encroaching on the South that like is antibiotic resistance and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
mean, really, like it. I don't know. Some days it's like we are living in a comic book. Some days it's like we're not, and I don't know. It's just fiction is, I don't know. Every day we get closer and closer to like some post-apocalyptic nightmare.
Yeah. I think some of that is, someone has put a little bit too much aluminum foil in their hat.
Yeah,
And then the other parts is just like, this is a very good possibility that, should it head in that direction, sort of thing. What was I thinking of? Oh, so in 2019, since we're talking about like, post-apocalyptic scenarios, in 2019, do you know what Second and Charles is?
yeah, we have one here.
All right. So it's actually a sub company of Books a Million.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. Someone told me
Yeah.
that like a couple months ago, and I had no idea. No wonder why the book prices are outrageous.
Yeah. So I just happened to be going through the graphic novel section and just making a wrap around into the manga section to see if I can find anything old school that I can pick up that I'm not having to pay exorbitant amount of shipment fees for something overseas. So I just happened to run across this one shot manga that apparently they had released in the, I want to say somewhere between like 97 to 1999. It's called Seraphim, and it's done by Satoshi Kon and Masumune, sorry, Masamune Oishi. I think that's his
Mm.
name. It's so Satoshi Kon did Perfect Blue,
Okay, yeah,
and Oishi did the animation for the Pat Labor movies and Ghost in the Shell.
mm.
So basically, the two top guns in anime got together to do a manga. There was a bit of a falling out going on between them somewhere after about maybe the sixth chapter into it. But the whole thing starts off that apparently there was some form of the avian flu that originated from China that somehow it affected people's genetic structure to the point that they start hallucinating, and they end up starting to grow what looks like the beginnings of wings out from their shoulder blades.
Hmm.
And it's like a whole progress kind of thing. And so when they get to their final state, they almost look like an angel.
Interesting.
Yeah, and of course they end up dying because of dehydration. The genetic code starts breaking down because it's inserting that something that's not human into a human, and all this
Right.
sort of stuff. But there was a secondary effect to this flu. All the birds are like massive. We're talking like flying fortress massive,
That's cool.
and they can literally take down a fighter jet if they wanted to. So um, it's interesting because like I'm reading this comic. It's 2019. I'm reading this thing. And I'm like, man, this is so awesome. I hate the fact that this is the last piece of work before Khan ended up dying a couple of years later.
Mhm.
And Oshii was talking in the liner notes in the back of the book, and it was just like, just the whole situation of them falling apart, because I mean they're both A-type people. They both had a bit of an ego, and so it was just a lot of butting of heads in terms of where they wanted to go with it, and so they just mutually agreed, let's just stop, and that's why it didn't continue on. Because it did kind of end a little bit on a cliffhanger. So of course, like The Last of Us, they just happen to have a girl who is completely immune to it,
Hmm.
who also happens to be positive infected with it,
Interesting.
but she's completely immune to it. And so they basically have to, because of just how like in every single post-apocalyptic thing, like lines that were countries are no longer. So like it's now a separate province here, or this is now New China, or New Mexico, or whatever it is, because no one cares about old Mexico. So it's the New Mexico. So, anyways, so they're trying to take this, basically smuggle this girl in to. I think they're trying to get to like Nepal or Tibet or something like that, but they have to go through China. There's no other way because of contacts and all this sort of stuff. And so, and of course, in the liner notes, Oshii is talking about how there is this, genetic testings and stuff like that with viruses or whatever is really big in the Wuhan province in China. So here comes 2020, and in the Wuhan province of China,
Yeah.
we've got this, virus dropping and it's spreading, and now we're finding out it's COVID-19, so on and so forth. And this book has, it's been out of print since like the early 2000s, but you can still find a copy of it on Amazon if you want to pick it up. I'm pretty sure you can find it for like $10, 11
That's
bucks.
not bad.
It's not bad at all for like a 150 page one shot manga. It's really not that bad at all. But here I am. It's 2020, and I've already read this book, the year before. And I'm just
Right.
like,
Yeah, it's like a Twilight Zone moment.
Nostradamus
Yeah.
kind of thing going on. So now I'm swapping my beanie for a tinfoil hat because I've read this thing.
Well, I mean, I remember hearing about it, and I think me and Kylie watched the movie Contagion with Matt
Ooh,
Damon, and like
yeah,
it's one of the most accurate depictions of like a virus, but what happened because all the virologists that like I can't remember who the director was that he used when he like made the film. So it was just I don't know. It's very surreal when like it's like wow, society won't break down that way. Yeah, it will. It will.
yeah,
We've proven that. And I read a book about the 1918 influenza pandemic,
yeah,
and this is why I was doing the World War One research because they correlate with everything, and I got so stressed out like reading about that with everything going on. Like Kylie, my wife, had to tell me like you got to stop reading that because like it was like I'm being for real though. Like the 1918 influenza was so bad that at one point people literally died in their homes, and there was no one to check on them because a
Yep.
lot of people that lived near them died. So a lot of people, it was like weeks or months later that they were figuring out because of the smell that, oh, this whole family died. And it
Mhm.
may have been that one family member had it, but if they had a baby, the baby starved to death, or the child starved to death, or the dog starved to death that lived in the house with them, like some horrible stuff. And I
Yep.
was like, and I mean, it was that way when we lived in Florida. I mean, there were people sleeping in their car because like they were like medical doctors and stuff. They didn't want to go into the house and infect their family.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, it was real. I mean, we all had to live through that. At least it's over somewhat now, but it was crazy. It's still hard for me to believe that stuff that our great great grandparents went through, we had to go through. And now I'm like, great. So we went through another pandemic. Um, Hopefully, there's not going to be a giant, massive World War II type war now. And yeah, I know. I was like, please, please don't let history keep repeating itself.
Yeah.
So like, we're in the weirdest timeline right now.
So it's stuff like this that at one point I really wanted to be a world history teacher. And most of it was just like, if I ever do get to that point and I'm in a classroom and I'm trying to teach kids, you know, stuff that they think is completely, not relevant to their Gen Z lives. And it's just like, actually, it kind of is, because I can
Yeah,
open up, one book, and I can pick out 5 different places in history that this is just a repeating process. And, it's most of this crap, I can really boil it back down to like the early colonizations.
oh yeah.
You
I
have
mean,
because you have Europeans who are trying to leave, uh, mostly Great Britain, but of course, the French and Spanish were also trying to, get their claim of fame with whatever piece of land that they can get on. But as far as like the 1600s, with the Puritans trying to fly over to the Americas with early colonization, I can really pinpoint it back to there. It was just like they're trying to leave the problems from the old world to go into the new world. But the problem is that as time progresses, all those old problems from the old world make their way into the new world. And
yeah,
now it's just a vicious cycle continues. And what gets me is that even though, yes, there are still some problems in the old world, old country, whatever your old great great granny calls it, they do still kind of exist. But what gets me is how, for some reason, it's just somehow, the UK and Europe, somehow they have just got to that point where it's just like, okay, we can't keep continuing this. We've got to fix this. And they have been making strides to fix it. But no, here comes ye old America. We know what to do. Nope.
well, I think a lot of it has to do with too,
I
like,
love how this has gone completely
I
off
know.
topic.
Well, I mean, I think even though it does go off topic a little bit, but at least we're trying, and with everything, and there's of course everyone's gonna think their ways right and whatnot. But I think that the important thing is, like you said, like you want to be a teacher, let kids read books, and the more they read, whether it be a comic, um, anything. I mean, the whole thing is like opening up somebody's mind so history doesn't repeat itself.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, look at people trying to ban mouse this past year in like certain
Yeah.
schools and stuff. So like,
It's
we're
not the
very,
first time they've done that too.
you're right. You're right. It's not the first time. But the thing is that you should never burn a book or be afraid of what's in a book. It's a book. And the fact of the matter is that if it has an idea in it that you might necessarily agree with, read it. If you don't agree with it, put it back on the shelf. You can find another book.
Yeah.
But the thing is that like it's being open and receptive enough to realize you have an opinion, I have an opinion. We may not agree on it, but I don't want to kill you over it.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. And I think the important thing is that like what you want to do with you're saying about being a teacher, and like I was a teacher for a while. The kids have a lot of questions they want to learn. The greatest thing you can do is give them a book, whether it be a graphic novel, comic book, and talking to a child, answering questions. Don't try to put them in front of a TV or an iPad or anything like that. Try to talk to them. And, my philosophy has always been to like try to leave the world a little bit better than the way that I found it. And I always thought, doing comics was a way of connecting to that because we could reach such a wide audience with comics. And maybe it's not, you're like, well, you want to do horror books. How could that do it? It was like, well, we kind of live with horror every day, and
Well, I
war.
was gonna say read Grimm's fairy tales. I mean,
Yeah.
it's technically
Yeah. It's pretty dark. Yeah.
yeah, but there's always a moral or a lesson to it in terms of just don't be the bad person, bad things won't happen to you, sort of thing. So
Right. And I mean, it's just everything. You're always going to run into opposites of opinion. It's just like being able to agree to disagree and move on with life. And don't be an asshole.
yeah,
I mean, that's really kind of what it gets down to. And it's kind of like the same way in like comics as like, the industry's so small and, don't be an ass to anybody because I mean, you never know who knows who or whatnot, and I mean, you just never know.
I can't even say the word whatnot without someone thinking that I'm trying to sell something online. It's getting to that point now where it's just like I can't say specific words anymore because it's just like, oh, he's going to auction something online. No, I just happen to say whatnot, not whatnot.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like things are things are so different now, but I don't know. Like I love comics, and I know you love comics too, because you wouldn't work in a comic shop if you didn't love comics. But like, I'm grateful that we live in a time, at least in history, that we have the availability that we can like have comics really at the touch of our fingertips, really, from a
Yeah,
phone to physical print media. And I don't think print's going to go away anytime soon, especially with sales numbers being what they are, especially in graphic novels.
yeah.
So I don't know. It's really fortunate for us to be alive. It's just trying to do the work to like get it out there or do live streams, and then people know more about what we're trying to do.
Oh
So
no,
I
he's
know.
saying live streams. Panic.
But I've enjoyed talking to you, Thomas, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that people were able to tune in and like join in the chat and whatnot. Is there anything else in the chat, or because I'm getting a little tired?
I don't think there is, but I am going to pop this on here. It's the link to your website so that if anyone out there wants to, find anything that you just happen to do, I'm pretty sure this is the place that they can find it aside from social media.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to go to social media, it's just like my name, Reid Beaman Art, and I don't have Twitter anymore. I just have Instagram, and there is a Facebook for like on my artist page.
Right.
Um, and if you already follow Thomas like on Instagram, you can just search his friends list, and I should pull up. I think because like I linked you in the announcement for this, so
Right.
like yeah. But definitely like if you want to give me a follow, thanks. I appreciate it. Give Thomas a follow if you haven't already. Follow him. He's a pretty cool dude some days. So
Nah, not cool at all. Never claim to be. Don't care to be. Bah
you're an
humbug.
old man with lots of old man problems.
Hey now. Well, I've all of
I know we're the same age. So.
them. My knee still works, sir.
Yeah, your knees. Yeah, your knees in my back. So. Uh,
All right. So, any last words that you would like to give anyone who just happens to be, I guess, still watching this all the way up to about the 2 hour 40-minute mark?
Yeah. Well, thanks for sticking around, guys, for all of you that stayed and was there when the conversation went on the rails and off the rails and back on the rails again. I mean, it was a great time talking to you, Thomas, and I'm sure everybody else enjoyed it. And I'd love to be back on the show again,
Yeah.
whenever you want to do it. But yeah, guys, stay tuned to see what me and Thomas are going to collaborate on. There'll be more news. Sometimes, I mean, we're working. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just know for a fact we may not post a lot about it, but there is a collaboration going on. Just not in. I mean, we just can't. Cannot show it right now. So
So,
yeah.
if I remember correctly, I know for a fact you're doing HeroCon in
Yeah.
what's June, July.
Yeah, it's Heroes Con this year will be Father's Day weekend in June. I think it's the 15th and the 16th.
Yeah.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday show. I don't know what my table number will be, but I will definitely be there. Heroes Con will probably be the only show that I do this year, just because of the fact that I want to try to turn out as much work as I can. So the best way for me to do that is work from home. So try to catch me in Charlotte. Are you going anywhere this year, Thomas?
So I've got 2 shows that I know for a fact in Huntsville, a month apart. The first one's in Low Mill, and it's going on the 3rd and 4th of March. I'm about to double check the calendar. Yes. So it's a Friday, Saturday thing. And then, of course, Huntsville Comic Pop Expo. That's the last weekend of April. That's just kind of, like Reid with him always doing Heroes Con, Huntsville Comic Pop Expo. That's my thing that I like doing now. That's my mainstay. So you can definitely find me at that. So I'll be at both of those. Not sure exactly where I'm going to be landing for Free Comic Book Day. So until I figure all that out, I'll definitely be posting it. And not particularly sure where I'm going to end up as far as towards like fall, winter. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm doing anything out of state or not. I think one of my biggest things, like you, was trying to curb back the amount of events and conventions and stuff like that. Because doing 4 in 1 month was it was a bit taxing.
Yeah,
sure.
I don't, dude. I don't know how you did that. That's a lot. Even I wouldn't do that to myself.
Well, I wasn't expecting, certain things to be falling.
Right. Yeah.
Especially when I was trying to do a couple other things at the same time, and it just ended up just going. But at the same time, it also went. So yeah,
Well, that's good. Yeah.
Sound effects, love it. All right, so I want to end off the show with a lot of housekeeping, like I did at the beginning of the show. If you want to know where Haven Comics is, we are located at 1871 Slaughter Road, Suite F in Madison, Alabama. And please remember to like and subscribe. Every like, every subscribe, every follow, every click the bell notification, blah, 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 blah. That really helps us out immensely. And if you want to follow Reid on social media, just type in Reid Beaman Art. And I definitely know for a fact that he is on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to find his profile through mine, you just find me through Linktree. tpriceartworks. And again, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, Hive, and Mastodon. And at some point, maybe I'll get that online store up and ready. That's a goal for this year.
Good
So,
luck.
yeah. I mean, it's 60% finished. So, I mean, I'm getting there.
Yeah, but it's just it. I remember building websites and stuff. I mean, it takes some time. So good luck, for
Yeah.
real.
Cheers. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a good rest of your week.